Thank you, Ms. Pokoto. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty One territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Mr. Robert Hutchings. I'll be chairing the hearing today. I'm joined on the panel by Ms. Gail Anderson and Mr. Jerry Arnell. Representing the Assessment and Taxation Department, City of Winnipeg, is Mr. Pontanilla. Our administrative personnel is Ms. Pokoto today. We have no Zoom participants except for Mr. Neufeld. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questioning that the applicant and the panel may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questioning by the, excuse me, by the assessor and the panel. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions based on the evidence presented here today. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7 on our docket today. Ms. Pokoto, please affirm the assessor and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Rodrigo Pontanilla.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Rocky Neufeld.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pokoto. Good morning to both parties.
Good morning.
First on the docket is item number 1, file number 24-4124. Address is 1461 Pembina Highway, and we're dealing with a 2025 realty assessment appeal. Mr. Pontanillo, when you are ready, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So up next, we have file 24-4124. The roll number is 0306-507-7000. The address is 1861 Pembina Highway. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $2,936,000. This property has been labeled as a commercial retail store. We have 3 building records associated, 6 premises on the building, and it's a 1-story building. And we have an actual year built of 1980 and 1998 with the same effective year of 1980 and 1998. And the land area is 60,177 square feet, and the total leasable area we have is 18,730 square feet. On page 2, I have included the pad eye view image of the subject property so we can see its orientation on off of Pembina Highway. On page 3, we can see the pictometry overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have included a north-facing view and an east-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5 and 6, I have included some Google Street View images of the subject property. So we can see that we're dealing with a, looks like a grocery store at the front. And then we have some vehicle service garage at the back. On page 8, we have some more information here. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. It does show a sale from 2004 for $2,071,650. And underneath that, we do have some subject property leases that we have included with the subject property. So we can see unit 1861 at $10 per square foot for 1,800 square feet. Unit 1871, sorry, I'm not sure if I said that first. I meant to say 1861 for the first lease. 1871 Under the Hood Service Inc. We have that as a lease for $9 a square foot at 7,800 square feet. And then we have the ING, looks to be the grocery store that we have there, a supermarket. And we have that at 8,050 square feet at $18 a square foot. On page 9, I have included some rent comparables. So on page 9, I've actually included rent comparables that are within the same market region as the subject property. All of these are C2 or commercial spaces. Oh, apologies. Actually, there are a few from other market regions here, but there are some from within the same market region as well. And these are all just under 4,900 or just over 4,999 square feet. So we can see the leasable areas range from about 4,580 square feet at the lower end up to 9,830 square feet at the higher end. And then we have some rents ranging from, I guess, $9 at the lower end up to just over $20 at the higher end. From there, I have included another list of rent comparables. These would be for vehicle service garages. So admittedly, these are citywide, as it's a little difficult to find some comparables that are directly within the subject property's vicinity. But we do have one that's on Pembina there at 2645 Pembina, and then the rest are from citywide, but they are all vehicle service garages. And we do have the areas ranging from 2,300 square feet approximately at the lower end up to just under 4,000 square feet at the higher end. And then we do have some rents ranging from just over $11 at the lower end up to looks to be just over $14 at the higher end. On page 11, I do have the subject's income stream. So we can start with the first income stream, which is the vehicle service garage stream. So we do have what looks to be 5 premises associated on the income stream, 3 C2 premises, 1 C9, which is a leasable basement premise, and then 1 C6 storage premise. The areas range from 400 square feet for the storage up to 3,000 square feet or so for the main floor areas, with one at 1,800 square feet. We do have model rents for all the rents that are being applied to this income stream, and we do have the rents ranging from $5.10 at the lower end up to $10.43 at the higher end. The total that brings us of potential rent is $81,692. The total area that we have is 10,680 square feet. And if we just quickly do the math on that, we do get a blended rate for this income stream of $7.65 per square foot overall. From there, we do have the model's parameters. So we do have a 2% vacancy loss. We do have a 3% expense rate and a $6 shortfall per square foot. And that brings us to our net operating income of $76,374. And then we have a modeled cap rate of 6.55%, which brings us to our assessed value, for this income stream at $1,166,000. On the second income stream, we just have one premise, which would be for the supermarket. So we have that as a C2 standard finish, and we have that at 8,050 square feet at $17.20 per square foot. The total potential for that is $138,460. And then from there, we have applied the model parameters of 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $7 shortfall. And that brings us to our net operating income of $124,773. And then from there, we have a modeled cap rate of 7.05%. And that brings us to our assessed value for the income stream number 2 at $1,770,000. On page 13, I do have an income value summary of the information that I've just provided. And I would just like to note that the blended cap rate for both income streams is 6.85%. From there, we have included the capitalization rate information that we provide. And so we do have a table there of the 20th and 80th percentile for cap rates. If we look at the retail row, we don't have the the subject properties parcel use code that we have on there for commercial retail stores. So the closest we'd have would be the strip mall. And we have the 20th and 80th percentiles at 5.6 to 6.75%. And then we have the outside sources of Colliers at 6 to 7%, CBRE from 6 to 7%, and the Cushman and Wakefield from 6.5 to 7.5%. On page 15, I do have the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 16, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense information. And we'll note the 3 leases that are showing. We have the auto parts lease. We have 2 auto stores, I guess you would say, or 2 businesses that are automotive related. We have their leases there. And then we also have the ING supermarket underneath that. And then on page 22, we do have the subject's income statement with a requested reference here. And that takes us to the end of my brief and the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pontier. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes. You talked about a sale. What page was that?
Oh, that would be on, I believe that would have been page 8 of my brief.
Page 8. Sorry, I'm just looking for it. Oh, I see. And did you investigate the sale in any way?
I took a cursory look into the sale, and from what I could tell, it was verified as a valid sale, and we had included it for analysis. But beyond that, I don't have any other details about the sale itself.
So when you say a cursory look, what does that mean?
I took a look at the records that we had in our system, and it looked to be that the sale was verified to be included in our analysis.
Did anybody talk to the purchaser or vendor?
I don't have those details in front of me, sorry.
Okay. What about your records in the assessment department? Because I'm obviously have been involved with this property a long time, and
Yep.
and including going back to the sale date.
Yep.
And I know we provided information to the city on that sale. Was there anything in the records of the assessment department notes in any way?
I don't have anything in front of me right now, so I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Okay, all right. And what was just no, the rent tables you provided, are they grouped by usage code? Because I didn't see a header in here.
Oh, no, that was just for my own information that I was providing the panel.
Okay, so you've got pages 9 and 10. These don't have like one was for the commercial and one was for the service garage.
It was. Yes, it was.
Okay.
So the top page would be just commercial leases, and then the bottom half would be for vehicle service garages.
Okay. On that top page, I'm just wondering, you have 1761 Pembina listed 3 times with rents ranging from $9 to $29.26.
Yeah.
Didn't you find that a bit unusual?
I had figured that they maybe would have parceled out the space from how it was being used. Like it looks like the 6,000 square foot space at 1761 Pembina Highway 4 was
Sorry,
a.
are you making assumptions only? I'm just wondering, asking about
Oh, okay.
facts.
Yes, I'm making an assumption.
Okay, I don't want to pick on you, but uh, I just want to be clear that that is an assumption. So you
Okay.
don't have any hard evidence to understand why there's a 300% difference then.
Um, I'm not really sure if you can reframe the question, I guess. I have three different tenants for the three different spaces there. They're not all used by the same tenant.
That's right, but you have a wide range of rents, and so I'm just wondering if you have any evidence to tell us why there is such a
Oh,
massive gap.
this is just what's reported. It's just what we have
Okay.
in our system.
You know what the users are on those three?
One's a car wash. Number one is an automotive service, and number two looks like it's some kind of a mart. I don't know. Maybe that could
Okay.
be another automotive service mart. I'm not sure.
And the fourth one,
Number four is a car wash.
the car wash. Oh, I see. Okay. Um, so maybe that one should have been with your other grouping below, shouldn't have.
It could have been. It could have
Yeah.
been, I guess. Yep. It definitely could have.
And
Actually, maybe it was on that list if I remember, and then I trimmed it out of that one and I left it in the one.
right.
But you're right, that one is a car wash. Yeah, it could have been on the other list.
And that leads me to my next question,
Sure.
considering, because I looked at the picture and I knew your answer already.
Yeah.
So your two lowest rents in this whole table in the service garage are on Pembina Highway. Did you find
Yep.
that interesting?
They look to be in line with what the subject property's at. I mean, the
Oh,
subject
I
property
understand, I
has
understand,
single
but
digit rents as well.
when you go to the rest of the city and you bring up other rents, does that not give you some pause about the strength of Pembina Highway for that particular usage?
Um, Again, I'm not really sure what I'm being asked, so this is just the
Well,
data that I
well,
provided.
service garages on Pembina Highway, from
Yep.
your evidence,
Yep.
demonstrate lower rents than the rest of Winnipeg.
That's right.
Okay, that's right. And that any analysis on that subject?
I mean, it looks to be like the market data supports what the model had it for the vehicle service garage, so I didn't really see where the
Okay,
discrepancy would be. Um, my only guess would be that maybe because it's recessed on Pembina Highway, that might have an effect on the leases that's being the performance of the properties back there, but that's merely speculation on my end.
okay. Um, and you said that for first of all, this entire valuation was done by the model, correct?
Correct.
And you've produced, or the model has produced two separate revenue streams. How many titles are on this property?
You mean for ownership?
Yes.
I don't have that information in front of me, I believe, if it's not listed.
Well,
Yeah, it's not listed
uh,
on page one. We just have one owner.
yeah, but can these separate revenue streams be sold separately?
Oh, I'm not sure, Rocky. That's I'd be speculating at that point.
Yeah, okay. So you don't know. Okay. So again, so because you have uh, different parameters for capitalization and vacancy and as well as rents, well, I think I understand the rents. That makes sense. But how can you have a different vacancy risk and a different cap rate on the same parcel of property?
Well, we have it listed under different income streams, and the income streams do have their own particular parameters. So it would just be based on the analysis that the model had for vehicle service garages as opposed to retail streams.
Well, I guess my question is that what you're saying is this is the way the model does it?
Yes.
Okay. Um, and in your capitalization, you said the closest was a strip mall. Now, do you know whether or not your modelers had any actual sales in the 2 years preceding the reference date?
I'd be speculating at what the modelers looked at.
Okay, I'm just wondering. So you don't know if they actually had rates or simply adapted older rates, then, do you?
Um, Again, I'm not,
I've heard other assessors make a statement that there were no sales and they ended up relying on
oh,
older sales. But if you
okay.
don't know it,
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be speculating at that.
okay.
I wouldn't feel comfortable saying.
Now, why is the city's rate, their percentiles, so much lower than the companies that actually do report sales?
This is just what the model has produced for our analysis.
Okay, so did it not, like, you're looking at this independently? You
Yep.
think, you know, there is, now, by the way, the Collier's cap rate is incorrect, and I'll have that, and I have that in my evidence. It is higher than this, but considering that people who sell these properties are capping it higher than what the city says, now you're reviewing it today. Does that not give you an idea that maybe you could be a bit off?
I mean, there's always an idea, but 6.55 for a vehicle service garage. The tenants have been there for years. We have 7.05% on a supermarket stream. A blended rate of 6.85. That seems all right for me.
You said the tenants have been there for years. I've been involved with this property 20 years, and they've flipped tenants about 6 times. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Um, I think those were my questions. Yes, those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the assessor?
I have no questions. Thank you. Thanks for your presentation.
Mr. Arnell, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
No, I believe everything's been answered. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I have no questions either for the assessor. Mr. Neufeld, first of all, ask, are you going to have any rebuttal evidence?
No, I didn't submit any. There may be some verbal statements along the way, but which I just made one of.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, Mr. Neufeld, allow us to get up your brief, please, for 1861 Pembina. If everybody's got it. Okay, we are ready. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you. So, as I have mentioned, I've been working with this property owner. Actually, it's been longer than no, about 20 years. And at the time when he actually purchased the property, and it is not a market value sale. If you look at my picture on page 1, you can see the parcel is got the red dot on it. It's long and narrow. Now this owner owned the lot to the south of it, and that on that lot there's an A&W strip, and now there's a brew pub in the back. We used to be a pool hall. In 2004, the owner of the parcel to the north cut off access and built a fence across the property line. Now the owner on that's the one on the north did that. The one on the south, he did not have an easement agreement. And what happened was that they began to suffer some significant loss in tenancies because of the access points. They were relying on that access, and especially from the Plaza Drive, yes, Plaza Drive as well. So the property was then offered to them for sale at a very high rate. In real estate, this is legal. Other places they call it extortion, but he had to pay the price in order to get his access back. And that's called undue pressure. So this was pointed out going back again almost 20 years, and I thought the assessment department had put that in their notes, because in the follow-up appeals we've had on this, they've stated that no, we know it wasn't a market value sale. And so now I'm just having to restate this again for the records, because there's always the risk of saying, hey, you bought it for $2 million. Why do you think it's worth not at least that now? Because that's not what they paid for. Now the tenancies, as I mentioned, this is a very difficult property, because they have the storefront retail, which is now a I'm trying to remember what's the right politically correct word. An ethnic grocery store? I don't know. But before that, though, it was a sports shop. And in the back were two developments for garages, and it's not service garage really. It's minor work, accessory work. Like they don't get into any sort of deep mechanical work. Essentially, tires and very minor repairs are performed there because they don't have the facilities for major work. And they've had significant turnover because the people who are renting these, there aren't name brand people. You know, this isn't Goodyear, because Goodyear wants frontage. These are smaller outfits. So the covenants are poor. Covenant meaning the guarantees on paying the lease. Local users, because they're rearage. And that's the problems with that. The income there has always been, just to be thankful we've got somebody occupying it and paying our CAM costs. Essentially is there, and plus it keeps the integrity of the two lots better and improves the quality of the one to the south, which is 1875 Pembina. That's the background on it, and the income on it is this particular owner operates on somewhat of a semi-gross basis, and the statement is on page 3. This is it's a very small operation, and no sophisticated property management company. This is what they produce. This is what they file with CRA. As full, 200,334 a year. That's as full. And knowing their performance over the years, this has actually been a good year for them. We used that number as our number as full, and there was some rounding. So we ended up with 200,590, and that was just, we had rounded numbers for the rent. We weren't. It was close enough. As to vacancy, this is not. You can't parse the building out and say one side's going to get a vacancy of 2% and one gets one of 5%. As a matter of fact, the vehicle service garage has had historically a vacancy that's approached about 15% historically because of the location of it at the rear. And Plaza, by the way, is not a drive-through. It dead ends right there. It was originally, the plan was to connect it with the sugar beet lands when they were doing their development, but crossing the rail track was a problem. So it is a dead end at that point. It's not a through street. We had looked at a number of 4.5% for vacancy, and that was based on, we had looked at two sources. One were the city's parameters, and the other was, I always have that book handy on my table. The Johnson report, and it's a form of retail. It's not a defined form. You can't buttonhole it. So we were looking at the overall vacancies in all sorts of different operations, not including power centers, of course, and then the local vacancies, and the variances in them. And Fort Garry over 10 years has gone as low as 2.9%, as high as 7.5%. And we rounded that, all those numbers, including the overall vacancies in the categories closest to the subject, to and again also considering the subject's spotty history in the past, to a 4.5%. I personally think I didn't prepare this, but from my experience, I would have gone to a higher vacancy rate because of the performance. It's the rearage tenants that are very difficult to maintain, and as you know, even with low rents, you can't keep them in. As to non-recoverables, obviously it's still a point of contention. We've never accepted the city's concept, the model's concept. They don't exist, and one of the reasons why is if they get their information from owners. So if you looked at this statement that the owner provided, and I'm looking at it right now, and it's on the assessor's page 21-22, same thing we provided, and this is how it's calculated. 331 coming in the front door, 131 being spent on expenses that are attributable to the operation that we can claim, we're claiming, and there's no breakdown. Now, this is very typical of a small business landlord. And that's one of the why the model has errors in it, is because when you get a statement like this, how do they decide if they're non-recoverables or not? And really the only way is to spend a day going through their statements and figuring it out. And you know, the model isn't built for that. So but I have spent the time going through their statements, and they do have significant non-recoverables. So this is a question of actual facts, not speculation. When we calculated the shortfall, we also looked at the actual cost to run this, and it's a minor difference from what the city has, and I believe their overall shortfall appears to be 563. That in itself is very much of a problematic issue, because if you just looked at the taxes alone on this site, they're about $5 a foot, just taxes, and then you have to pay for utilities, some maintenance on the site. So the number they've suggested at 685 is not realistic. I've been saying this year an awful lot that this shortfall should never be applied in the method the city does, with one rate for one sector. It should be linked to the income. Because the higher the income, the higher the taxes, the higher the shortfall. It's a direct linkage. This is one that fails that methodology. The capitalization rate is. I just want to take you through my background information, and I am changing that because I just looked at it now. We do this workup. You've all heard this before. Our page 2. And we take the best rates, and then what are the subtractions for quality. I find some of these in error that I don't agree with. We're going to actually change that to 7.5, more consistent, because this is fairly typical of an investment quality place that would fit in the higher ranges of our Collier's standard. On page, I'm not going to go through the calculation of the cap rate and the spread to interest rates, but other than to remind everyone again that interest rates make the cap rate. If you have high interest, your cap's got to be higher because you got to pay the loan, and that's how the cap rates plan. That's why it exists. Is can you pay the loan? It's a very simple linkage. So our actual rate, there was an error on our report, the one the city is using, and the one that should be used is shown on our page 33. It is from a few months prior to this quarter 1 report, but the quarter 1 report 2023 inadvertently was not changed from a previous year. No one bothered on the Winnipeg side to change the numbers. And so they just, whoever puts this report together in Toronto, just used last year's numbers. And we discovered this error only about a month ago. Because in quarter 4, 2022, the rates were higher, and yet in quarter 3, 2023, they were still all higher. Yet quarter 1, 2023, miraculously had this drop of a whole point for some properties. So we have sent a letter out and put it in our evidence just to point out the error, and that's on page 38. And the rate that would be, as you can see, that our rates were from 6.25 to 7% for those, and our descriptions of those are listed on page 37 for retail. And you can see that they do not consider issues like a tire shop in your backyard. So that's really the biggest problem with this, is that it has a non-typical retail operation on it, which is not generating the income, and it's inconsistent. So that's why we went to 7.5. Now, to give you an idea, we actually have one cap sale that we found on an investment property. There are very, very few. So on page 42, this is Artis REIT's sale of 8 properties, 4 in Winnipeg, 4 in Calgary. And it's in their statements, and it capped at 7%. Now, generally, Calgary is capping lower than Winnipeg. I guess there's a lot of people in our office who are familiar with the operations, but we are putting this forward as a 7% cap rate. And this is closer to a power center with anchors, although it's a little bit harder to describe because it also has a neighborhood shopping flavor to it. Until the sale happened, there were some problems with absorption here, but at time of sale they were full. So that's a good site at 7%, superior to the subject in the same neighborhood. So that's why we thought I thought 7.5 would be fair on this, and that changes our value from the NOI is the same, but at a 7.5% cap, the value is 2,298,000 rounded to a nice even 2.3 million, 2,300,000. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Pontinia, any questions of the assessor's evidence, or do you have rebuttal at all, Mr. Pontinia?
No rebuttal. Maybe just 1 or 2 questions for Mr. Neufeld, but no rebuttal evidence per se.
Thank you. Proceed.
So, Mr. Neufeld, on page 1 for your total net income, how did you derive those rates that you applied? Are those market rates, or were those?
No, those are actuals. Those are estimates of the actuals.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Are you aware that on page 21 of my brief, I've included the lease information for the actuals? And that if you do the math, it does vary slightly from the rates that are being used on your stream?
And if you recall in my opening statements, the income is semi-gross.
Okay, so the lease information there showing the management fee as a recovery as its own, that's not a recovery there, or?
No, I'm just saying that that the declared incomes, and that's on page 21,
Yes.
do not do full recoveries.
Okay, so even though they're listed there, they're not full recovery.
Well, look, the owner isn't an accountant. The owner isn't an appraiser, right? This is the way the guy runs his books.
Okay.
There's no problem with it, because the bottom line on this is it's probably you would not focus on the rent roll. You would focus on the financial statement with a semi-gross. That's the proper way to do it.
Okay, fair enough. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pontinia. Mr. Arnell, any questions of the applicant?
Just here to clarify with the last question. So you're saying that the net rent that you show on your page 1 is not the actual rent being paid?
No, I didn't say that at all.
Oh, okay.
Well, what I said was that the rent being paid that was on the assessor's submission and our own, it does not represent a net rent. It represents a semi-gross rent.
Okay, gotcha.
And when we get rent rolls like this, and we'll probably today you're going to see a lot more of the semi-gross style, as opposed to, say, if you had a strip mall owned by a REIT, they'd be giving you the net numbers, but the local operators do it this way, and it's they're we have this dilemma an awful lot when talking to the assessor. There's no law that you have to report net rents as they want them described. You just present them as per their statements, and you got to be able to do some adjusting.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arnell. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, so just to summarize, you're using your existing NOI of 200,590 and revising the cap rate to 7.5%?
No, the NOI was 172,375.
200,
You were quoting the potential income. I was the net income after vacancy and deductions was 172,375.
oh, right, okay. Where do I? Oh, I'm seeing net income twice. Okay, my mistake. 172,375,
Yes, that's
7.5%. Equals a requested value of, sorry, would you mind repeating that?
well, that number works out to 2,298,334, and we've just rounded it 2,300,000.
Okay. Okay. That's what had me confused. All right. And I think that's all my questions. Either party require a summary?
No summation for me, thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
I do. I think the couple the points here are we differ a bit on the income and the vacancy, and that's because we have a retail shop that's got rearage land with a tire repair place in the back. That doesn't improve the value overall. It doesn't give you a better vacancy rate. It gives you a worse vacancy rate because it's located in the back. I told you it's turned over 5-6 times in the time I've been working with them. So our income is more reflective of the true nature of the property. It's a question that the model doesn't pick up. And then for the cap rate, there's no such thing as a blended rate. There's no such thing as separate revenue streams. An investor is going to consider this on the whole. And on the whole, they'll say, okay, not too bad storefront. Don't like that part in the back. It's not the best return. And the best return you saw was 7%. We've adjusted to 7.5. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Okay, that concludes item number 1861 Pembina Highway. Next item on the docket is item number 2, file number 24-4382. Address is 1220 Pembina Highway. And we're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Pontanilla, bear with me 1 second and while I get this up, please. When you're ready, please.
Okay, thank you. So up next, we have file 24-4382. The roll number is 0309-027-1000. The address is 1220 Pembina Highway. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $537,000. We have this property labeled as a commercial retail store. We have 1 building record associated, 2 premises associated with the subject property, and it's a 1-story building. We have an actual year built of 1955 with an effective year built of 1965. We have a total land area of 6,303 square feet and a total leasable area of 4,428 square feet. On page 2, I have included the pad eye view image of the subject property, so we can see its orientation in the neighborhood. On page 3, I have included a pictometry overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have included a south-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5, we do have I have included the Google Street View images of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. We do have a sale that does come up, but its consideration is for $1, so there's not much weight put on that sale. And we don't have any leases associated with the subject property. So for my rent comparables, I have included rent comparables that are within the same market region as the subject property. These are retail strip comparables, so they're not exactly the same, but they are within the same neighborhood as the subject property. And these sizes range from 871 square feet at the lower end up to 2,000, just under 2,400 square feet at the higher end. And then we do have some rents ranging from $17 at the lower end up to about $23 at the higher end. On page 8, we do have the income stream for the subject property. So we do have 2 premises associated with the income stream. We have the main floor premise of 2,214 square feet, and we have a modeled rate of $16.16. And then we also have a basement that is on the income stream as well at 2,214 square feet at $3.03 per square foot. The total potential rent being generated by the model is $42,486. And if we divide that by the total area, we get a blended rate of $9.59 per square foot. From there, we do have the model's parameters for the subject property. So we have a 5% vacancy, a 3% expense, and a $7 shortfall. And that brings us to our net operating income of $37,601. And then from there, we do have a cap rate applied of 7%, and that brings us to our modeled value of $537,000. On page 9, I have included a summary of the information that I've just provided. On page 10, we do have the cap rate table that we have spoken about in the previous file. On page 11, we do have the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 12, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense information. And I believe that takes me to the end of my presentation. And that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pontanillo. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes. This is classified under your coding as CMRST. What was this originally built as?
I'm not aware. This is just since I've been working with it, it's been a CMRST.
Okay, so you're not aware it was a Bank of Nova Scotia?
I wasn't aware of that.
Now, how does your model deal with the changes in use code when the bank vacated and a non-bank moved in as tenant?
It would get a different modeled code, so it would have different rent rates applied than what it would be if obviously it was a non-bank tenant.
Right. And when these rates changed, did the building change?
I believe I'm not really sure what the details would have been when the old bank left and the new tenants moved in, what it would have looked like.
And I'm actually looking at all the permits that occurred between the vacating the bank and the new tenant moving in, and it appears like they changed the sign. So does that indicate a change in value?
Well, I mean, if there's a new tenant in there, then the model would be applying the rates that would be appropriate for the current usage, which would be not a bank and more of a retail.
Right,
use.
but if you don't change the physical nature of the building, is not then the model focused on valuing the business rather than the realty?
I would disagree. I mean, we have the effective year of 1965, I believe, on it. So the model's taken into account the older characteristic of the building.
Now, your picture on page 5, the bottom.
Yep.
You have same one on the top. Do you have the date on that picture?
These would be from I have it written as a 2024 map overlay. So it would have been the most recent that we had in Google Street View images.
Okay, and the picture shows that there's some construction work being done on the front of it?
It looks like there's some repairs, that's correct.
And can you read the blue sign in the second pane from the right?
I don't have a microscopic glass on me to zoom myself in, but it's hard to read. I can't read it, Rocky, sorry.
Okay, but can you make out the Colliers logo?
I can, yep.
Okay.
I'll agree to that. I can make out the Colliers logo there.
Yeah, okay. And the rent roll that they provided
Yep.
on page, sorry, I gotta get to it here.
Yep. I
Page
think it's
14, 15,
and
and
16.
16. Now on page 16,
Yeah.
what's the term of the lease?
It was showing month to month.
Okay. So as of the time they sent this in, which would have been the end of 2022, they were on a month to month.
It appears to be so, that's correct.
And do you know when they vacated?
I don't have that information in front of me, actually.
Okay.
But
And-
I can agree that it does show vacant in our records as well, so they are vacated from there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. All right.
I can agree to that, yep.
Okay, good. And the statement in on page 14
Yep.
confirm this indicates a gross rent.
That's correct.
Okay. So their declared net income is they missed the line, as you can see, $35,418.
Yes, that's what they're showing for their net operating income. That's correct.
Okay, no, okay, as full, right? There's no vacancy listed on this statement.
No, there
Correct.
isn't. No, you're right. Yep. And then if I'm just going over what you're saying. Yes, the net operating income does show 16,434. So you'd presume as full. That's correct.
As full, okay,
Yeah, you'd presume that. Yep.
right. And so the model put that at 42,486, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And how does the model decide that you're going to add the basement as rentable space?
It would have been included in our records. The basement is always something to consider when reviewing a property, but I looked at the information provided and I couldn't make a decision yay or nay whether to include it in the income stream I kept it in there for the sake of consistency. But I don't know the current use of the basement. I haven't inspected it myself.
Okay, so but it's rather, is it a coincidence that our rent, the actual rent would be almost identical to what's declared for the main floor only?
I'd say that's a desirable output of the model to be as close as it is in this situation.
Yeah. And is the basement separately demisable?
Meaning, does it have a separate entrance?
Can it be rented?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Okay. Well, how does the modelers decide that it's rentable space without that information?
Well, we have it as an 08. So if you look at our income stream on page 8, we don't actually have it as a C9 leasable basement. We have it as an 08 substandard basement. So the model code that we have on there is signifying that it's basically just used as extra storage space, really.
But it's giving it
We're in
a
agreement.
separate.
We're in agreement. It's not a leasable area. It is just a
Okay.
basement space that's thrown in.
But you are giving it a rental.
We are.
right?
Yes, we are. That's correct. And again, that can be looked at, but I just didn't have the information provided as to the exact use of the basement, whether we should keep it in or not.
And as on your rent table on page 7, there are no basement rents there, are there?
These would just be what we have declared for the leases.
Okay. But you didn't bring a table of basement rents to support this number, did you? Of $3.03.
Typically, they're not
Did
declared
you
in that
bring-
manner where they have a
I know.
basement separate
Did
from.
you bring any evidence? That's
It's
all
all
I'm
thrown
asking.
in. It's all thrown in. The evidence that I have is the evidence that you have in front of you.
Just confirm, there are no basement rents in your evidence today.
Well, I can't confirm or deny because this is just what's included as the leasable area declared. So whether they have it thrown in and that's part of the lease, like 900 square feet, 1266 Pembina, $23 a square foot, does that include the basement? I'm not sure. So I can't both confirm nor deny that. This is just the lease information that I had that I included in the brief.
Well, can you tell, do you even look up to determine if any of these premises had basements?
Uh, I mean, we put the information in there as it's declared.
Okay, so I'm a bit puzzled here. So instead of saying you don't have basement rents, you're just saying that whoever put this together, the modeler, didn't know what they were doing. That seems to be what you're saying, isn't it?
That's not what I'm saying at all, no.
Well, without research, you're attributing rents without research. Not you, but whoever made this up.
I'm not sure how to answer that question.
Okay. Well, it wasn't really a question. I was making more of a statement. And in terms of a capitalization rate, the same question I asked earlier, do you have any, are you aware that there were any sales of investment properties like this property?
The cap rate information is what we have modeled, so that would have been a modeled rate.
Okay. Um, those are my questions.
Thank you to the applicant. Mr. Arnell, any questions of the applicant?
No, all my questions have been asked already. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions? You're on mute.
Well, sorry, I guess I was off mute and I pressed mute, so I apologize. My only question is if you have on record as to when the last inspection of this property was undertaken.
A cursory look just had some notes related to some BA work that was going on, which I guess would be the sort of related to when the last inspection was, but I don't have the information in front of me exactly. I just have the information that there wasn't any realty related notes, that it was related to business assessment, but I don't have the details of the notes in front of me, sorry.
Okay, and you don't have as to when that was?
No, I can't speak to that. I'd have to look in the system, and
Okay,
so I just don't have that information in front of me, sorry.
okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Pontinia, this property is not owner occupied, is that correct?
I know there was some turnover from the information that was provided in regards to the tenancy, so I can't speak to that if it was owner occupied. Actually, if we look at it's a numbered Manitoba, it's a Manitoba Inc. number, so it's not, I can't speak to whether or not it was owner occupied.
Okay. Thank you. That's my only question. Mr. Neufeld, bear with us 1 second, please. Okay. If everybody's got Mr. Neufeld's brief up, Mr. Neufeld, please proceed. Mr. Neufeld, you are on mute.
There are some changes I have to make on this. One error you can see right up front is the listing of the non-recoverables. There was supposed to be a minus sign in there. I guess when it was plugged in, someone forgot to put the minus sign in front of it. All our work's done by hand. We don't have a computer to generate any of this. Lots of human error. When we looked at the site, this again, I've been working with this particular property since 2008. And when it was a bank of Nova Scotia. And the debate has always been the city wants to add on the basement space. And we've always said, who cares? Look at paid rent. How, you can't create rent because you say there's a basement. We've always said, just go to the paid rent. And over the years, one of the things we've noted is that if you actually include the basement space as rentable and you still stick with the paid rent, the value drops because you have shortfall and vacancy on that. and the value is less than if you were just focused on the upper floor. The site has had on its fourth tenant since I've been here. The first was Bank of Nova Scotia. There was a tenant for 2 years in 2014 to 16. And then in 17, this particular tenant moved in, had it 5 years, stopped. You can see where the term ended. And he paid his rent until the end of the end of calendar year in 22, and stopped paying his rent, and then was gone April 1st, 2023. And now they've just secured their fourth tenant in the time I've been here. And the rent has always been virtually the same, which works out to about $12 net per square foot on upper floor space. And they have faithfully supplied all their statements. You're looking at another one, and you can see this company does nothing but gross rents, or generally always gross rents on their retail properties. So it's 51,000 gross less expenses, and 35,000 income, net income as full. So the thing we've always played with on this property is, if you look at our workup, is if we call 4,428 square feet leasable, then there's an additional shortfall that's subtracted. That's not the way it should be treated. It should be treated as just the upper floor. Whatever contribution the basement has already been accounted for in 4 sets of freely negotiated rents in the past 15 years, which includes the last term, Bank of Nova Scotia renewal, and the 3 subsequent tenants. It's always been in around the same mark of $12 based on, sorry, not 12. The actual number would be 35,000 net on the upper level, which is probably about very close to what the assessor has placed on it. So that's roughly $15 to $16 a foot has been what it's been all the way through. Now, the difference over the years is they've had higher costs to operate, and you can see the statement you're looking at today is a very low repair and maintenance here, but that's the way it is. So the changes I'm making is, I don't like this concept of including the basement space as rentable, because it artificially drops the value. And the other one was the mistake on the non-recoverables. It should be a minus sign. So the net income has not changed, potential income 35,424, but the vacancy does not change, because that's based on dollars. But the shortfall drops to $900 from 1,243, and the negative sign in front of the non-recoverables makes the total NOI $30,562, 30562. And I heard me before, I don't like to go down in value, but this was a true error, the minus sign. The other change I made it go up in value. The cap rate at 8% lends a total value of 382,029. That's 382,029, rounded to 382,000. That's what we're putting forward to the board today. And the appeal history on this has always been, it's been long. We've had 3 assessors in the building to look at the basement, and it's always been contentious. The basement value has been considered in the 4 leases, not artificially added to it. So that's obviously problem number 1. And the second problem is the cap rate. The building was built in the 50s, and the only change, if you look up the building permits over the years, is they got some new signs. It doesn't change your economic life of your property. And of course, the night deposit box has been removed finally. But in our picture, page 2, which was I think from 2021, you can see that the night deposit box from the Bank of Nova Scotia is still in place. And the current pictures that the assessors provided from 24 show that it's been boarded up for removal finally. That's the only change. And I don't think that changes the life by 10 years. It's still a 1955 building. And it's storefront retail, Pembina Highway, side parking, and not a great investment, but we've had turnover here, but the 8% I believe is fair. It's got to be higher than any of these reports indicated, like on the assessor's page 10. Colliers, as well as the other firms, don't report cap rates for X banks turned into storefront retail. Well, we don't track it. Most all of us have a limit of 10,000 square feet minimum before we even consider most of these most properties to be considered investment. So this is not investment; it's sub-quality investment. So when we looked at it from our work up in Colliers and came up with the 8%, I think that this is a fairly good indication of where it should go. You can see we've made deductions for a location, and the reason we say Pembina is not a good location is because when 40 years ago Pembina was the place to be, but then all the work started to happen in West Winnipeg, the corner of Kenaston and McGilvery boomed in 1999, and then we had IKEA move in later. So all the retail that can afford to pay the big rents has migrated to Kenaston. We're left with miscellaneous on Pembina Highway, and the prospects of improving it are based on redevelopment, not taking the same tired old 1955 building and hoping and praying you're going to get a good rent. No, you want to get a better rent here, you're going to buy the whole block, bulldoze it, put up a larger, more modern complex. And so that's got to factor into the location, the low parking. This angle parking with an access from Pembina is no longer would under our current bylaws would not be approved. The rear parking could still happen, but it's not set up that way. This is I don't know anyone ever lived in a small town. This is small town style, which is quaint, nice, but it's not going to get approved anymore in planning. And that's another detraction from it. Of course, the year built and the quality and condition. I've been in there lots of times, and in 1955 was a pretty nice bank, but nothing's changed. It does not possess modern amenities. You can put a new sheeted drywall on. That doesn't change your effective age of your building. And I've already mentioned to you the only sale we could find on an investment grade retail at 7%, which is superior, vastly superior to the subject. And other than that, I have nothing new to add. And make it short so I don't even have to summarize. 382,000, which is a 10% increase from the last assessment, which was 350,000. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Pontonia, any questions of the applicant?
Just a few questions, but I actually believe that it was answered in Mr. Neufeld's presentation, but I would just ask them anyway. Mr. Neufeld, so just to clarify, on page 1, the rental rates that you applied, did you derive that from the actual rates that the building is receiving, or was that market rates that you applied there, the 12 for the main floor and 4 for the basement?
Page 3, which was the potential income.
Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
No, I'm just quiet. Can you hear me now?
Sorry, Rocky, you're muted right now. I can't hear you.
It's an issue on the assessor's end, I believe.
Okay.
Can you hear us, Mr. Pontonia?
Am I muted now, or can you guys still hear me?
Muted.
You can? Okay.
Oh,
I can't
right.
hear you guys right now, actually, Mr. Hutchings. You're also quiet.
Yeah.
Did I get muted again?
Yeah.
See,
Oh, I did.
we're not quiet.
Oh, okay. Now I can hear you guys. I don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, my For some reason, my headphone output just mutes me. I don't know. Maybe it's telling me to talk less, I guess. So
No,
sorry, I didn't hear your answer. I apologize. You probably went
No,
on for a few minutes.
okay, we're using page 3, which is the
Yep.
actual potential income, 35,418.
Yep.
And when we wanted to see a round number up there, so it 35,424, $6 difference. It looks nicer to put a rent with zeros than one with 97 cents at the end.
Oh, I see. So did you gross out, I guess, what was being put there for the rental income? You just, because since it said gross, I guess you just did a calculation to
Just subtracted
gross.
the expenses.
Yep.
It's the actual income.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand that. And then just one last question. On page 34, I'm going to take you a little further on your brief there. It's just coming back to what you'd spoken about earlier with the Winnipeg cap rates that Colliers had provided as the update of 6.25 to 7%.
Yeah.
Just to finish my question, wouldn't the
Sorry.
model's cap rate be in line with the information provided by Colliers there, as we've applied a 7% cap rate to the subject property, or would this one fall outside of that range, is what you're
Well,
saying?
no, I don't think it does, because when the city does theirs, you know, I guess the concept that we're following is somewhat similar to yours. You do a 20th percentile and an 80th percentile.
Yep.
What we do is we look at the rates that are generated, and we do a high and a low, and there'd be some similarities in the methodology to the
Of course.
20th and 80th. So it bears some change. So what you're seeing is that your 5.6, we
Yep.
would say is 6.25. Your 6.75, we'd say 7.
Okay.
And then Cushman would say that it's 6.5 and 7.5. And nobody ever reads CBRE because they don't have a presence in Winnipeg.
Yeah.
It's Colliers and Cushman who have the presence. And I think the difference between Colliers and Cushman is a quarter point and a half a point, and it's probably the grades of the properties we deal with.
Okay.
I think they do a little bit more miscellaneous, Cushman.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Pontier. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell?
No, not at this time, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Neufeld, okay, so okay, I've got a potential rent of 35,424, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, what square footage did you use, and what rate would that would be applied to come up with that 35,424?
Okay, let me give you the exact number, because I got to do it. I'm actually going to work it backwards.
Okay.
Equals B2 divided by B2. Oh, I see. Oh, it's $16.
Using the main floor area of 2,214 only?
Right, that's correct. $16 is 35,424.
Okay, and I've got a couple of different numbers for the NOI, net operating income. I've got 30,829, is that right?
I may have just bumped my numbers and changed them. You could have had that right originally. But I'm the formula I've got here, and I haven't double checked it, is D7, D10, 3315, no, 30562.
Okay, the original one, okay, 30562, okay.
Yeah,
Capitalized at 8% equals a value of $382,000 requested?
that's correct.
Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Do we have any rebuttal to submit by either party?
None on my part. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Neufeld?
I think I inserted it in the questions and the testimony.
Okay. All right, a requirement for summary by either party?
I'm okay. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld, okay, that concludes item number 2, 1220 Pembina Highway. And I think we're gonna recess for about 8 minutes, please.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Picoto. We will now call the hearing back to order. Next item on the docket is item number 5. Address is 549 Academy Road, file number 24-3926. And we're dealing with a 2025 Realty Assessment Appeal. Mr. Pontanillo, when you're ready, please. 549 Academy Road.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So up next, we have file 24-3926. The roll number is 1207-089-4100. Address is 549 Academy Road. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $538,000. This property has been labeled as a commercial retail store. We have 1 building record associated and 3 premises associated with the subject property. And we have it listed as a 2-story building. Actual year built is 1946 with an effective year of 1976 in place. We have a total land area of 4,411 square feet and a total leasable area of 2,112 square feet. On page 2, we can look at the pad eye view image of the subject property. So we can see its orientation in the neighborhood. On page 3, I have included an overhead view of the subject property. And we can see it's on the corner of, I believe, Lanark Street and Academy Road. On page 4, I have included a south-facing view and a east-facing view of the subject property. So we can see that we are talking about what looks to be like a row building with many roll numbers associated side to side. And then on page 5, we do have the 2024 map overlays Google Street View images. So this would be the latest images we have of the subject property. And we have those on page 5 and page 6. On page 7, we have received requests for income information. So we're okay there. And we do have a sale from 2001 for $150,000. And we have no leases generated with the subject property. For rent comparables, I have included rent comparables that are within the same market region as the subject property. These are all smaller on average, so we do have leasable areas ranging from 660 square feet up to 1,400 square feet. And then we do have rental rates ranging from, looks to be at the low end, $8.96 up to $24 on the higher end. On page 9, I have included the income stream of the subject property. So we can see that we have 2 premises associated with the subject property, each one for 704 square feet. One's at $20.69 modeled per square foot, $17.35 is the other one per square foot. And then we do have a C9 leasable basement premise associated at $15.39. The total potential rent generated by the model is $37,615. And if we divide that by the total area on record, we do get a blended rate of $17.81 per square foot. From there, we do have the model parameters. So we do have a we do have a vacancy loss of 5%, a 3% expense rate, and a $7 shortfall per square foot. And that brings us to a net operating income of $33,923. And then we have a modeled cap rate of 6.3% for an overall value of $538,000. On page 10, I have included the income value summary of the information that was just provided. On page 11, we have our cap rate information that we provide. Page 12 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 13, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense information. And I believe that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pontanillo. Mr. Neufeld, any questions on the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes. Have you been in this property?
I have not inspected it.
And what is it currently being used for? Do you know?
Just give me 1 second. So it looks like we have an audio studio on the main floor, unless I'm mistaken. We have some sort of an audio business that's going on. And then for PID 34008, that's the premise we have for the second floor. We have that one currently vacant.
Okay, and do you have an occupancy for the basement?
The basement also looks to be, I'm just not sure. I haven't inspected it myself. I don't know if they use it as a studio space or whatnot, but it's currently vacant in terms of the tenant information in our records.
Okay, what's in the basement? Do you know?
I'm not sure, no.
Do they have a furnace?
I'm not sure about that information.
You don't think, well, do they have a furnace? Do you think in Winnipeg? Come on, they have a furnace, don't they?
Of course, they would have some sort of heating, but I'm just not sure if it would be unit to unit or if they have some for the entire. I'm not sure of the layout of the mechanical
Okay.
route, the mechanical nature of the building.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. It was built in 1946. Safe to say that construction at that time had a basement furnace or boiler.
That's a fair statement.
Okay. So, in other mechanical areas that we live in Winnipeg, so the plumbing comes through from 6 feet underground through the basement and distributes there with hot water tanks, etc. Where do you get the measurement that the basement is fully rentable?
It's just what we have on record.
Okay. Um, and the owner, what is he listed in his return to you?
For the actuals, just give me 1 second. If I go down to, looks like we have one tenant listed at 2,100 square feet at $3,000 per month. So if you do the math on that, it is listed as a gross, I believe. There's no recoveries. So if you do the math on that, if you want me to, 3,000 a month times 12, and then divide that by the total area, 2,100. It's a rate of $17, but I've done no adjustment for a gross rate, so I'm sure it would go down by obviously a few dollars to get it down to a gross rate.
Well, they provided you expenses of $15,484.
You want me to do the math on that now?
Well, I mean, I guess my question here is we're dealing with moving targets on area and rent.
We are,
But
that's right.
okay,
So that 15,000 for total expenses, it doesn't even, oh, okay, I guess they have the admin maintenance and, I mean, I can do the math for you if you want, Rocky. Let's see.
well, I mean, basically what
I
they've
don't mind doing
submitted
math
to
here.
you, what they've submitted to you is net income of about $20,500, right?
Yep. 15,
Okay.
44, 56, you're right there. And if we divide that by the total area, you get about $7.37. So if you want to take that 1714 and then net out the expensive, $7.37. We're gonna get under $10, about $9.77.
Yeah. I guess your model by including this basement space is overstating the income. Again, like we looked on the last one by a significant amount compared to actual, correct?
Depending on, yeah, if you're looking at it from that perspective, that's right.
Okay. Um, and how does your model treat row homes? Is there any sort of a special modifier for a row home? Well, not home, but commercial row?
Right, right. I'm not aware of any adjustment factors that would be put on. From my understanding, there's separate roles. There might be, so I don't want to speak out of line, but I'm not in the modeling department, so I can only speak to what I know. But I would like to add, Rocky, just as a quick to your last question, it's true that we do have the basement thrown in, but the total area of 2,112 square feet lines up pretty close to that total leasable area that they're declaring as well. So I just want to throw that out there that there is.
Sure, and but one argument on your side kills the other one. You either use it all or use none of it.
Yeah.
So if you want to accept the 2,100 feet, you've got to accept $20,500.
Mm.
That's, and I'm sorry, that's more of a statement than a question. My apologies.
Sure, sure. No worries.
And now I looked through your rent comparables, and they seem to have a fairly wide range again, 896 to 2492. Any idea why there's such a drastic range?
I mean, they're reported leases. I'm not really sure of the details. Would that be a grossed out netted lease? This is just the information we had provided. And in fact, that one might have slipped my view a little. I should have looked into that one a little more, but this one could even be a second floor as it says 106 Osborne B. But that's speculation on my part. I'd have to take a double look into that.
Well, it kind of aligns with the age in this case, doesn't it? Your lowest rent is from the oldest property and your highest rent is from the newest property.
It looks to be that way. I mean, again, I haven't looked at the details of this particular lease in relation to like how it lines up exactly with the subject properties. It was just a data point that I threw in there.
The effective age is 1976 in your books. How does that change from 1946? Why did it change?
At some point, the assessors would have done a review on the subject property. They would have deemed that the effective age should have been increased. I don't know if there was any permits that were taken out on the row building as a whole. I mean, if you look at the recent pictures, it does look to be pretty fresh for an outside. It's definitely not a dilapidated building. So, yeah,
Okay. On that note, can you take a look at page 6?
yep.
So each row building shares a garage, correct?
It looks to be.
What's that black stuff on the back of the garage, on top of the doors?
Probably wear from years.
Black stuff.
I don't know. I mean, it
thought-
could be mud. We don't know what it is. I don't know. I'm not I haven't looked at it.
Okay. Is that header on the garage door in good condition? Is it showing signs of erosion, rot?
It could be, yeah. I mean, it's a garage in the back. I don't know. It's definitely not the same quality as the row building itself.
Top of page 6, the black stuff leaking down from the side. You see that?
Yep.
And wouldn't you, as a casual observer, say we might have a problem here? We should be looking at the quality of this a bit differently.
Um, I mean, it was just included. It's separate from the main building itself, so I don't know how that would necessarily be placed as a hex on the entire building. I don't know if they're even being used or not. It's that's beyond that would be speculation on my part.
I understand that, but does that not lead you to say maybe we should inspect the interior of this to look for the same degradation?
We could, yeah. I mean, we could
Okay.
absolutely set up an inspection at some point in the future to relook at it if need be.
And the the parking area is graveled, correct?
Looks to be, yep, that's correct.
Now, in 1946, that was okay. Is that okay today? On
Many
planning?
buildings, I mean, many
Bylaw?
buildings still have it. I'm not sure about the exact bylaw for the zoning that'd be if it needs to be all paved over or not. That's I don't have that information in
No,
front of me.
okay. And capitalization rate, what category does this fit in?
6.3.
Yeah. Like earlier, you were talking about one that you felt would have been in the neighborhood strip quality, and where does this one fit?
Right. I mean, our percentile is 5.8 to 6.8, so it'd be right in the middle of what our 20th and 80th percentiles are. If we're looking at Collier's 6.25 to 7, it's still within that meaty range of 20th and 80th for getting in there into basically average quality. It could be a little low. I mean, that's a matter of opinion, but I thought for myself the 6.3 was reasonable for the subject property.
Do you have any that's those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mufar. Mr. Larnell, any questions of the assessor?
No, none at this time, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. My only question, Mr. Fontania, is the garage assessed or is it just included in the income?
It's just included in the income. We don't have it as a separate line or an additional building value or anything like that, so.
All right, yeah, okay. Yeah. And any recent inspections on this, well, I won't call it this side by sides, but on this subject property?
It's a little hard to classify. Yeah, I haven't, I don't have any notes indicating when it would be like the most recent inspection. For myself, I didn't inspect it. Some of the points that the applicant raised are great points. I would like to maybe in the future set up something if we can come to a time to have a proper review to see what the basement's use currently is, et cetera. But I have not myself done an inspection.
Okay, thank you. And my last question is, in your workup, sorry,
Yep.
I'm trying to find the page here after the pictures. Where are we? Okay. Oh yeah, first of all, what is the blended rate on the 3 levels, please?
Yes, 1 second. The blended rate would be, so that 37,615 divided by 2,112. The blended rate is $17.81.
Okay, thank you. And on your on your breakdown of the premise IDs, the bottom one, the basement,
Yep.
the sign, it says basement leasable. What does that mean?
So basically what that means is it would be some sort of, from my understanding, of course, it would be some sort of a use that the basement would have that would directly benefit the main floor's operations. So
Okay.
you could think of it, for example, as like a hair salon that would have a basement that has chairs in the basement that maybe they rent out to other stylists or they have their own stylist that they use it. You can think in this scenario, I'm not really sure what the use used to be, but I know the current use on the main floor is some sort of an audio business of some sort. So without inspecting, I would imagine that perhaps there's maybe a recording studio in the basement or they
Sir,
must have
I'm going to
some
object to that, but
use.
you can't say things like that and guess what's down there. Maybe there's a dog groomer down there.
It's speculation. I'm merely pointing out what a C9 would be used for in that
Well,
sense.
I
I don't
think you
mean to
should,
say that that's exactly what it is. And if there's a problem with it, I'll retract that statement.
Well,
please do.
I can retract that statement. Rocky has a point. I haven't inspected it myself, so
Okay, my
he's
question.
not wrong in that sense. I was just speculating.
Okay, what I was going to ask next was, what is C9? What is that category?
Well, that's what I was speaking to. So that speculation that I was giving you of those examples of how it would be used to support the main floor's operations, that would be a C9 designation, whereas an O8 would be more of like a storage space where you would just use it
Okay,
for
okay,
storing things related to the basement or not. So
yeah. Okay, so the C9 in somebody's past inspection or whatever determined that it was leasable and usable rather than storage space. But Mr. Newfeld is questioning on the total area that would be usable down there, I believe.
I
That's
believe
what,
so. I mean, Mr. Neufeld could probably illuminate us to the exact use, and then we don't have to speculate anymore. It's his client, so
okay.
he should have an idea of it. But I don't have that information in front of me, so.
But when it's classified as C9, the model applies a rental rate per square foot.
Yep, just like it always would, but the rental rate would be different based on its use as opposed to an O8.
Okay, okay, that's all my questions. Thank you. Mr. Newfeld, let us get to your brief, please.
I just had a follow-up question.
Okay, go ahead.
Does the city assess basements in residential houses?
I'm not in residential section. I've never worked in the residential section, so anything I speak to that would be speculation.
Okay, well, they didn't assess mine, so I was just wondering if we have a different rule for commercial.
Well, we've always assessed basements for commercial use. Of course, there's a income valuation on it that we'd have to capture. But again, I haven't worked in residential. I can only merely speculate as to their particularities.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Newfeld, when you are ready, please. 549 Academy Road.
Okay, thanks. So these are 1946 post-war construction. The concept behind it, and I've been involved with them for longer than I really wanted to, going back 15 years, because there's a particular theoretical issue problem with this. But the original design was to have storefront retail on the first floor, living quarters on the second. And the basement is the basement. Every single one of these properties The basement is for service. Now, some of the unit owners have expanded their operations to do some storage in their basements. And in the case of this particular basement, I have been in it a few times. The upper floor was still almost virtually the same as a bedroom, 2 bedrooms. And the first floor was the living room area was opened up for an office use and a counter, and the basement was just services and some boxes of storage. In that respect, they used it. The problems this property has as a whole is that the party wall agreement, which was drawn up in the 40s, does not reflect modern problems. They have issues. There's one water meter for the entire complex, and the 11 separate owners are continuously at odds with each other on how much water everybody consumes. You note that the roof was finally redone, and that took them 10 years to get together to be able to do it, because there just was no agreement among the members. It's, in a condominium corporation, there are rules, there's a board of directors, there's a reserve fund, and you deal with it. These old party wall agreements are silent on so many issues. And essentially the property owners could all go a different direction. At one point, one guy was going to redo his own roof, and I said, well, how are you going to hook up with the guy next door? You got to feather it in, and you can't dump water on your neighbor. How are you going to cope with that? So he had an ingenious idea. They would put channels in his roof, so his water wouldn't drain to the neighbor and come straight down his pipes, and at least have a solid roof. And I said, great. So now your neighbor leaks in the water and it seeps into your attic and rots it. What are you going to do with that? And that's the problems they face. My point about the garages was that's an indication of the amount of effort, not only that they have done, but that they're able to do because of these the fractious ownership that is in place. The basements on these are not at all rentable. They're low ceilinged, as any basement is, built in 1946, which means you won't get a permit for occupancy on a basement. They're not meant for that. It was built as a hybrid sort of concept. And I don't even think, I'm just trying to imagine if I'm trying to think if I've seen another example of this in the city. I can't recall. There maybe some one or two like this in St. Boniface on a smaller basis, but nothing like this. So I did not submit pictures of the basement. I'm looking at them now. They're an unfinished. And as a matter of fact, I'm looking at a picture of a coal chute on the from the outside of the building to the inside. So I guess in 1946 there was still coal being delivered for heat. I'm not sure. I wasn't around then, but that's how these things were set up, and the foundation is cracked everywhere. But it's a wood frame property, so there's not a lot of weight being put on the foundation, unlike a modern building. But it's a house, and it's house quality, which is not the same as commercial quality. We've had several assessors through it. The last two I remember were Howard McCubbin and Mike Colatruglio, who's now sitting with you, and he would be interesting to have on the board, because he and I had a lot of debates about this property. And at the time, here's the issue we were facing: is he said, "Look, we agree." Now, I wait a second. I don't want to speak for him. Let's just say that the concept of what they're renting for and what they're receiving in rent was not disputed. There are half of these are rented, and the rents are similar to what you're seeing on this property here. The idea was, should maybe a different form of valuation be applied here, such as a direct comparison? But the issue with that is we had actually at the time 3 sales, 2 arm's length, one unit owner bought the one adjacent to her to expand her business, and that rate, of course, was much higher than the other 2 rates. But it was a thought that was put on it. I made the statement about the heating systems. These units, some have been modernized, Some still have the original boiler system, hot water heat for their operations. And I'm looking at a picture of actually of the other one you're going to hear today, and he still has the boiler system installed on his upper level. And the upper level is not a full floor. It's you can see there's a pitched roof, so the ceiling height isn't the full ceiling height. This would be, if this were put on the market as a house, they call it a 1 3/4 story, not a 2-story. So in a 1 3/4, if you're a broker, you've got to discount the top floor by 25%, so you don't lie about your room. Now, none of this happens in the model. They just take it all and lump it in. But essentially, this is 704 square feet on the main floor and arguably 500 to 600 on the upper level, which we've simplified to 704 as well, with a basement that is there to provide services, because in Manitoba, all the water and sewer comes in from 6 feet below, so everybody needs a basement. There's no value to a basement here, and no commercial operation is undertaken in the basement. It's not separately demisable, which means it cannot be rented separately. It will not get an occupancy permit for the basement. So this is a question of taking a converted house and trying to apply a standard to it that is designed for a purpose-built retail building. And there's where the break happens here. The actual paid rent, as you see, was $20,500, okay, so, sorry, I was just reading something else regarding this. So we're using that space, and I've been in every single one of these properties except one over the time, and the similarities are, I'll spend a bit more time on this one so I don't have to repeat myself on the next one we're going to hear today. It is, from a perspective of appraisal, from a real estate brokerage, 1,408 square feet, period. Now, this paid rent was, and I'm not sure if we had access to the same data the city had. No, we never got that statement. We were looking at market rents, and we have pictures of our market rents too, so that, and they're in the neighborhood. So the first one on my page 3 is 415 Academy. This is a single story, but similar vintage, $1,273 a foot on the main, a larger building. And if you're questioning economy of scale, a 700 square foot floor plate is not a good floor plate. Most of these people in here are, last time I was in there, were mostly all hairstylists and dog groomers. 2 chairs, except for the one on the side where they added one. Number 3 is a purpose-built commercial in Pembina, and that's $12 rent, but it is smaller. 1735 Corridon is on Corridon, but this is brand new, and they're getting 1983 for brand new space, not 1944 quality. And that's a real 2-story building. And then we have 2025 Corridon, which is a mall on Corridon, and this is just put in as a benchmark. 132,000 square feet. The average rent is $12.95 a square foot, which includes a Safeway and offices on the second floor. It is a blended rate, and it's not meant for a comparable. It just goes to show you that that on a mass amount, this is what you're getting for rent. 1724 Corridon. I can't remember if this was built or a conversion. I think this was built, and that's $14.25 a foot. 1543 Grant, which we've come to an agreement on, so you're not going to hear it, was today $965 a foot. So from all that, we have a blended rate of $10.37 a square foot. That's what the market would indicate, and we're not opposed to saying 20,500 as a statement, because we didn't have that income. I always believe that the actual income is far more important than comparables. And it has changed usage since the time that that statement was provided. Now they're selling audio supplies, and it's not there's no studio. Creative Audio is sold. Well, the brand name sold speaker wires, amplifiers, speakers, turntables when they had turntables, stereo equipment sales, not anything fancy. And you couldn't put a studio in a 700 square foot basement with a furnace boiler beside you. As I said, we would probably be open to changing that to the income, and I don't have a calculation for you, but it would just indicate a value that's 25% higher, which is $200,000. And the 8% cap, this is a cap that is so hypothetical. There's no tracking on these sales. There are not investment properties that are sold to an end user. So to infer that a cap is even possible is wrong. This is a placeholder cap. An investor will look at this and want a high cap if you want an investor to buy it, because it's a house and it's got problems and it's got a party wall agreement that doesn't look after the building. Verbally, all I'm saying is that the rent could be 25% higher, which translates to 25% higher value. So the math is simple. $200,000 would be what we're asking for it, and I understand that this is a difficult one for the board to consider. We were prepared to discuss alternative arrangements. That was the last thing I was going to say, is that when we finally settled this municipal board, and we settled 3 years worth of 2012, 14, and 16, it was not based on market values. It was a resolution. And it was coming to an agreement to say, let's find a number we can all live with, because it was difficult to value these on the income approach. And the direct comparison is so subjective. It wasn't, both parties said that it's hard to apply this. But you can't say simply because people want to buy them, you'll get a lower cap rate, because they're not buying it for investment purposes. The logic is broken. I would say that I think the 200,000 is low, but that's where the evidence leads us. And I would be very open to trying to discuss and finding a resolution with the assessor. But to present to the board today, I can't find a rational reason for going under $200,000. The rents aren't there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Pontier, any questions of the applicant?
Yes, just a few questions, but I believe at some point it was maybe spoken about, but I just thought I'd ask just for the sake of clarity. So, Mr. Neufeld, the basement seems to be part of the contention with this property. But I noticed that in the brief there wasn't any information. Was there a reason? I think you mentioned something about that you should have placed some information into the brief, but I just thought I'd ask why the information wasn't in the brief in regards to the basement itself. I would have liked to have known that, so that would have been something that would have been relevant.
Well, the information we had in the pictures and things were done between 2012 and 2018. So we've had to migrate our server, and the only thing showing up on our server now is 2020 and forward. So I had it in an older file. I didn't prepare this.
Okay.
So, but you know, we have 600 appeals to deal with, and you know, we try to get all the information possible, but I'd be glad to send you pictures. I have about 30 of them.
Sure. You don't have to worry about that now. It's just one of the things that I was considering, but so we can move on for that. So for your rates that you would apply, the rental rates, were those just market rates that you applied on the And I understand that you have moved it since by 25%, I guess?
Well, the market indicate a lower rent rate, and this was the same occurrence we noted in 2012 when we were starting this, is the market indicated a much lower rate than achieved. There are 5 sites in here that do achieve rents. And what we had done back then I was representing all of them but one, and so we were able to put together a rent roll in the 5 that had rents coming in. It did demonstrate higher than the market rents, and we're seeing this right here. Their actual rent is 25% higher than that. Sort of, well, not 20. It's 33% higher than the market rents. So there is some, I don't know what you want to call it, cachet, some attraction to this style of use with the small business.
All right, and as you're aware of the subject history and the building's history, have any of these buildings ever been used in a residential manner, or have they always been used in a commercial manner?
Yes, they have been, and I believe there are a few units now that still use their upper levels for living quarters, but
Okay.
not a residential use. Yes, but I certainly don't want to name names right at this point, but yes, there are still some in use.
Okay, that's good to know. And so I just wanted to ask, in a previous file for 1220 Pembina, I understand that it's difficult to value the subject because of the intricacies of the building itself being a row house, etc. But we are talking about the income approach, so we do have to sort of refer to that to aid us in our valuation. In the previous file that we spoke about, 1220 Pembina, you had revised your cap rate from that 8% down to 7.5%.
You know what, Mr. Pontinia, that's allowing information from one file to another, bleeding into the separate filings, so I don't think we should go there at all, okay? The board will, yeah, this is an individual appeal based on the information presented in front of us by Mr. Neufeld, so we're not gonna compare individual files on the docket today because they are separate appeals.
Okay.
Okay.
No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Neufeld, you mentioned that that there is disrepairs because of the multiple owners of the properties, and so things are left in disrepair. I'm wondering if you have any quotations or estimates of work that is required to the property that hasn't been done.
I have a list from a previous year, and I guess I didn't. They weren't aware that this list was out, and I'm just trying to see if I've got it in summary form. At the time, we had a contractor go through it, and sorry. I'm getting there. It's a 100-page document here, so okay. The finish, obviously, most of the finish is original, or very close to it. So, and at the time, there was a mix of old and new windows, and I think that's been done. The roof was, as I mentioned, finally done. I don't have the precise year that it was done. So some of these matters were fixed. The garages, of course, are tear downs. I'm only going from memory. We provided a list in our evidence because this went to the municipal board. I think, I don't believe there was a decision on it because we decided to come to agreement on it. Um, uh, um, I can't find it right now. Oh, wait, I got one more document, rebuttal. Huh. There were several that needed heating. The boilers up changed over to a modern unit. As I mentioned, some had been done. The ones that have been done were mid efficiency, and given this type of property, probably high efficiency was called for, just because of the way that the running a chimney through the roof wasn't a good option. At the time. There was some truss repair that was noted, and I don't know if the trusses were done. Framing of the door frames were, many of them had decomposed over time, moisture damage, 60 years of moisture damage. You have there was just really just a lack of general up maintenance that you would do on a home because no property owner could control the situation. Most of the fronts of the properties were not repaired, and they all needed brick repointing. And it's all. Sorry, I'm doing most of this from memory here because I can't find my list, but it's coming back to me. So there was it's like you were walking into a vintage home from the era, and some of the plumbing equipment was original. Some owners had upgraded their fixtures, and of course the sidewalks were shifting all over the place, and that's natural. This is Winnipeg, and we have silty soil. So there was a fair degree of shifting on apparent on the port areas outside, and as I mentioned, the foundation had cracks in several places. I'm sorry, that's all I can remember right now, and I haven't been in there a while.
Okay, thank you. And in summary, you had indicated the value that you're requesting is $200,000, and you did note that you felt that that was also low.
Yes, but again, I don't see a rational way at coming to a higher number if you're relying on the income approach. As an appraiser, we always look at the income and the direct comparison, and then try to come to a rational indication on it. And I think the direct comparison is going to would obviously indicate a higher amount. And I have older sales, dated sales, and I did a printout on them. And I'm just trying to find the most recent sales. Well, 2007, one sold for $289,000. In 2008, $280,000. And the highest one was 2013, $320,000. But that was the one that was purchased by the neighbor. So I'm reluctant to put a ton of weight on it. But then in 2014, there was one at 119,000.
Okay.
So the
Thank you.
sales would indicate some strength in and around the $300,000 mark from a few years ago.
Okay. That was helpful. Thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation, Mr. Neufeld.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Arnell, any questions of the applicant?
No, I believe everything's been answered. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, you said you haven't been in this unit for a couple of years, is that right?
I was there in this unit in 2019 or 2020 was the last time I was in this unit.
To do with a municipal board or something like that, was it, or?
No,
It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Okay.
good, because I don't want to say it on the air while I was there.
Okay. So physically, you go in the front door here and, I guess it was residential. There would be a stairway going right, there would be a foyer, a
Yes.
stairway up to the second unit and then a door entrance probably to a main floor unit. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the typical entrance way. You would walk in a long, narrow foyer, turn left, or right into the main floor, or up the stairs into the second.
Okay. And, physically, is that the way this is set up? There's a separate door entering into the main floor. Do you remember?
This one was opened up because they had removed that entranceway for a bit more room.
Oh,
But most of about 2/3 of the units had retained that setup. So, which is why you asked the question: is it demisable? And first and second floor are actually demisable. They have to share the services, the toilet, but they can each have their own space if the doors were in place.
okay. And, the current tenant, I'm not sure if you can answer this. Do they use that basement, although you think it's a reduced area or included in the lease? Do they use it for storage space?
It was paper storage at the time. Yes,
Okay, okay,
for the space that they had available. Yes.
yeah, okay. All right.
Half the units, no, well, I was gonna say that there was a mix. I would say a third were using it theirs for storage. A third had used it for kind of a sitting area, and a third were just completely basic 1944.
So talking about the subject from your last inspection, it's for storage only.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I believe that's all my questions. Was there any rebuttal,
No
That was-
rebuttal, thank you.
Mr. Newfield?
No, nothing.
And any requirement for summary by either party?
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that finalizes 549 Academy Road. Next item on the docket is item number 6, and I note that we have a preliminary review for non-cooperation. Is that right, Mr. Pontanillo? You're muted.
Sorry. Yep, that seems to be the case. We do have that issue to deal with.
Okay, so we're dealing with item number 6, file number 24-3491. Address is 577 Academy Road. We're dealing with a 2025 realty assessment appeal, and we have a preliminary issue regarding non-cooperation by the property owner, and the assessor, I believe, is requesting non-cooperation be dealt with. Mr. Pontanillo, if you'd like to start with that, please just bear with me while I get into your docket, please. Or pardon me, please.
Let me know when you're ready.
Is everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mr. Pontanillo, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So up next, we have file 24-3491. The address is, just let me zoom in here. 1207-089-5900. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $499,000. And as previously mentioned, we do have to first speak about the non-cooperation matter that we have in front of us. So if I can direct your attention to page 13 of my brief, that's where it'll start. And I actually apologize for the layout. Typically I do it the other way around, but for some reason I put it this way, which is a little more of a long-winded way to present it. But with that being said, so you'll note on page 13, if you're there, that we have the tracking number at the top. So we have LP 661-111-960 CA. So if you can remember that tracking number, this would have been the reprint for the official mailing that had gone out to the subject property. So we have a French version part 2 following that. And then on page 15 and taking us to page to page 20, I believe. We do have a reprint of the subject's income and expense mailer documents as it would have been sent to them. On page 21, we do have the tracking number. So once again, that tracking number that I had provided earlier, LP 661 111960CA. So you can see there that the delivery had gone out on June 9th. And the item was processed June 9th. It went out for delivery on June 12th. It was delivered on June 12th, and we did receive a signature. And on page 22, which is the end of the income and expense mailer presentation, you'll notice that there is a scrawl there, a signature in place, the same tracking number, and the delivery date that it was delivered to. So those are the documents I have in relation to the income and expense mailer.
Thank you, Mr. Pontanillo. Mr. Neufeld, any questions on the that presentation regarding non-compliance?
Yes, I do. Did you, sorry, 577, I had the wrong one on my screen here. Do you normally put out a record of the history of compliance?
It would be on page. So we would have the last two requests would be on page 7.
7, okay. And okay, so you received the response in 21, and you're saying you didn't receive a response for 22.
That looks to be the case. That's correct.
And do you have any of the other years that you can have access to? Just give us an idea of the history here.
I don't have that information in front of me. That's just what we have there in the brief.
I see.
Yeah, I don't think I have any. I don't have anything here on about. Previous
And
years.
I'm just wondering if you had anything else to show. You didn't bring any of the previous request for information.
It's the only one I have there.
No, I'm just wondering what they responded to in the prior year.
Besides that, no, just whatever's in the brief is what I have in front of me right now.
Okay. This property has had a long appeal history. Do you recall whether or not that was tenanted or owner operated?
I'm not sure, Rocky. Like, are you asking for now what the tenancy's like, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, you say you didn't get the mailer for this specific year, but you still had other ones. I'm just wondering if you had the opportunity to look at them at all.
Mr. Neufeld, Mr. Pontanillo, we are not going to look at any history on compliance of the income and expense mailers. We're only going to look at this year. We're not going to penalize or for somebody for not filling out in the past. We're just going to deal with.
Yeah. Well, no. Sorry, I understand that. I'm just wondering if essentially if the absence of this particular mailer in any way impaired the ability to create the role. And if the board wants to consider that, I just wanted to see if there was any information on that they may be interested in. So did you have history and know what was in there?
I just looked at the information we have, so we didn't have anything for 2022, and I did the best I could with the information that I had in front of me.
Okay. Those are my questions then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Before we proceed with your response, Mr. Neufeld, Ms. Anderson, any questions of the assessor regarding the application?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell, any questions regarding application for non-compliance?
Has this property been inspected in the last little while?
I haven't inspected it myself, and I don't have the notes in front of me in terms of the history of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Neufeld, any response to the request for burden of proof being applied to the applicant regarding non-compliance?
Well, I have asked the owner to review his files, and he sent me every return he's made. And I know you're not going to look at history. It is an owner-occupied site, and a tremendous amount of scrutiny on it, because this was our test case for the municipal board when we put this one forward. I don't think the city assessor was disadvantaged on this, given the amount of inspections. And I understand what your point on, you know, is the penalty to be applied in this case. I think nothing would have turned on getting the form or not getting the form, but we can't seem to find anything further to add to it. Neither receipt acknowledgement nor proof that was sent in. That's that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Arnell, any questions of the applicant regarding that response?
No, none, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
And I have no questions either. Mr. Cotto, could you please put us in camera? We'll ask the applicant and the assessor to be taken out of the room, and we'll recess while we consider the evidence presented by both parties, please.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Pacoda. Ms. Pacoda, pardon me. I will now call the hearing back to order. In regards to the assessor requesting the burden of proof be placed on the applicant.
And for some reason, I don't know what is up with this today.
Okay,
Every time I click on the volume to turn it up, it automatically mutes me. I don't know why it's doing that. I can't seem to get it to stop doing that all of a sudden. I just don't understand what this issue is. Let me just try to unplug and plug in. I apologize to everybody. I don't know what's going on with this right now.
okay.
Okay, I think it's holding now. Can you guys say something just to confirm?
Yes,
Okay, yeah, I can hear you now. I don't know why all of a sudden it keeps on muting you guys. I have no idea why it randomly does that, but it's okay now. I apologize.
okay, no problem. Thank you. In regards to the assessor requesting that the board place the burden of proof on the applicant for due to failure to provide information requested, the board's opinion is that the request be allowed. So burden of proof will go to Mr. Neufeld, the applicant. And Mr. Neufeld, if you bear with us, we're going to pull up your brief, okay?
Oh my God.
Mr. Neufeld, when you are ready, please, 570 Academy Road.
Okay, thanks. So this is a duplicate of what we've already heard. This one is an interior unit, and the space is it's a oh sorry, our dot on page 2 is not accurately placed, that's for sure, because it's in the middle of the site. This unit is essentially owner occupied, and it's a hair salon. And what the owner does is he rents chairs out to independent stylists, so they have a place to work. So it's not a rental situation, it's a shared business operation. So but it is owner occupied, and the upper level is got a chair in it, and the first level has a chair in it, and in the basement it's unfinished. There is a couch down there, but it's an unfinished basement. That's all that's down there. The same issue again is basements are not rentable. The market indicated a blended rate of $10.37 a foot. And you've heard how that transfers into numbers. An interesting point, I didn't bring this up before, but on the shortfall, the taxes on this at the rate are $8 a square foot, just the taxes. So again, it questions the shortfall calculations. The tax per square foot is higher. That is the main ingredient of shortfall. And when the model decides it's $7, that means it's an additional loss, which of course, because the city's also saying that there's no such thing as non-recoverable expenses anymore, is a double indicator of value of expenses not being properly allocated. With the and as I stated before, we just saw another one where the rent is 25% higher, and understandably, this might indicate that there's more value than on this site than some of the other ones, but that's only 25%. Now, I didn't get into the concept of capitalization rates other than to say that it's not a reliable methodology on this sort of property. But if you looked at it just from a hypothetical point of view, and then you said the best rate was 6.5, well, you don't get the best rate because of any other factors except the interest of the investor. Our 23 points represent what an investor cares about. So what they will not like about this, of course, the coverage ratio, meaning there's no parking. The garage in the back and a stall beside it, but certainly not for running a business. You have to rely on the street parking, and that's not something you can count on. It's small, so the revenue being generated is not suitable for anyone's investment income. Design and layout, the row home, which is the greatest drawback. It's the problem of the party wall agreement, which is silent on most matters of maintaining in good repair. And as a result, the whole unit suffers on it. Year built is there's no such thing as an effective age, because you did not change the frame, you did not change the foundation, you did not change the envelope. The things that you can upgrade don't make it younger. It's still a 1946 house. Quality and condition, most of these owners try to keep the condition up for what they can, but the condition isn't good. So that's why we came at 8% on a hypothetical basis for this. And just bear in mind that when people talk about cap rates, it has to equate to the ability to earn money, not factors that are in the top of someone's mind or the top of the model's idea. It is nothing except the ability to earn money. And so when they have a model that puts in certain issues, none of them directly relate to the earning capability. And the length and the strength of the revenue stream is the soul of a cap rate. This does not have it. So again, we had the same rents we looked at, which indicate a market. We have the other property which is earning more, and which I would tend to agree, and adjust this upward by 25% or 33% to $200,000. And as I mentioned before, I actually skimmed through the sales again and the prior agreements. And the last time we agreed for a value on this was done in 2018 at $285,000. And that was an agreement. And if you say, what was it based on? Nothing. It was, what can we do to settle this? Not objective, it was a settlement. That, if you looked at that today and extrapolated it for this property at a normal rate, it would be about $345,000 on as of today, because we actually had a formula back then. We just added $20,000 a year from 2012 to 2018 and said, can we live with this? Fine, we live with it. That's how it was settled, and not necessarily creative, but you know, the whole thing here is this doesn't fit into a model. This doesn't fit into a normal valuation of any sort. So we settled based on a completely subjective outlook on it, and which was what could each party live with. And we're fine with that today as well. And that I just re-looked at my math here, and it was 345,000 if you continue the sequence forward. That's not scientific. That's not market. That's just settlement. But otherwise, we're going to go into years and years of debating and case management and municipal boards. I think we should try to find a number we can both live with, and that's the one we can live with, 345, and also with the other one, through 549 as well. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Pantanil, any questions of the applicant's evidence?
I'm okay on questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell, any questions of the applicant?
Just to be clear, you're okay with 345?
Yes, but frame the way I said, this isn't value, this is settlement.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson, any questions?
You've been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, and I have no questions, Mr. Pantanil. Bear with us 1 second, please. We shall find your brief. Mr. Pantanil, 577 Academy Road, please.
Mr. Chair, I think we're talking about 1724 Cordon. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we just spoke about 577.
You didn't present yet.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I'm so used to going first that I forgot that I thought that we had actually finished the presentation. I was already closing and moving on to the next file. So just give me 1 second here to open everything back up.
Okay.
Uh,
We surprised you.
yeah, I thought you guys were done already there. 1 more second, just almost ready to go. And I believe I am ready now. Okay, so I'll now start with my presentation on 577. The file number is 24-3491. Once again, roll number is 1207-089-5900, and the address is 577 Academy Road. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $499,000. We are speaking about another label commercial retail store as we have it labeled. 1 building record associated with the subject, 3 premises associated, and it's a 2-story building. Once again, we have an actual year built of 1946 with an effective year of 1976. We have a total land area for this property at 2,603 square feet with a total leasable area of 2,112 square feet. On page 2, I have included the pad eye view image of the subject property. On page 3, I have included an overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, I have included a south-facing view and a west-facing view of the subject property. And on page 5 and page 6, I have included the latest Google Street View images. And that would be from the 2024 map overlay. We already spoke about the request for income expense information. We have no subject sales history, and we have no property leases that are associated with the subject. On page 8, I have included similar rent comparables as to the one that we used for the previous 549 Academy. So these are all within the subject properties market region. They're all smaller comparables, so 660 square feet up to 1,340 square feet. And then we have rents ranging from $8 up to about $22 per square foot. We do have 3 premises associated with the subject property. Once again, we have a C2 on the main floor, $20.69. And then we have another C2 on the second floor at $17.35. And then we have the C9 leasable basement premise again for $11.53. And so that brings us to a total modeled potential rent of $34,897. And if we divide that by the total area, we get a blended rate of $16.52. From there, we do have the model parameters. So we have 5% for an expense rate, a 3%, or sorry, 5% for a vacancy rate, 3% for an expense rate, and $7 for a shortfall rate. That brings us to a net operating income of $31,418. And then we have that NOI capped at 6.3% to bring us to our assessed value of $499,000. On page 10, I have included a summary of the information that we just spoke about. On page 11, we do have our cap rate information table that we provide. On page 12 is our Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 13, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense mailer information that we already reviewed. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pontanillo. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes. On your page 9, you've assigned a rent, or sorry, the model has assigned a rent of $11.53 for a basement. Did you supply any basement rents?
No, there's no basement rents. Those would be, I believe, main floor and perhaps a second floor there.
Okay. So as with all the properties heard today, no basement rents were submitted for evidence.
Well, as you're aware, basement rents aren't typically leased out as a separate line item, so it's very difficult to have an actual lease rate on it. Typically, it's modeled and it's based on the usage, whether it's a C9 or an 08.
Yeah, but in getting, and that's what you'd said before, but if you had a unit that included a basement, wouldn't you then have to try to break it out in some way? You're misrepresenting then, aren't you? Not you, I mean, how
wouldn't
this was
say.
done. And I'm sorry, I don't mean anything personal by it, you know, but it is being misrepresented then, right?
I guess that's just a difference of opinion.
Well, how many of your comps have basements? I had asked you that before, and you had nothing, no answer for that. I take it.
The information that I have provided is the information that I have there.
Okay. I'm no more questions then. I think we with the board's consent, we went through the same territory on 549, and I'm assuming we can assume that you don't need to hear the question asked twice and answered twice.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Miss Anderson, any questions of the assessor's evidence?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell?
No questions, thanks.
Okay, my question, Mr. Pontanillo, is the applicant stated that there's chair rentals in there. Would that be considered income that would be declared?
So my understanding is when we have a C9 designation, it's because the activity that's going on the basement supports the main floor's operations. So I'll let the board decide on their interpretation for this particular property.
Yeah, no, I wasn't regarding the basement. It was regarding income, and it's difficult here because there is no income that we received or that you received, right?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Hypothetically, would an owner or would you accept rental of chairs as income on the property? Is that what they would declare, plus expenses normally?
I would say that my information, just based on the information that I've looked at over the years, I typically see them as line leases, just as a space. I've never, in my mind, seen a chair lease, if that makes any sense. So
Okay.
they typically just lease out the space, and then if they have subtenants, that's up to them to do how they do um
We've got an
their
owner,
rentals.
or owner, leasing out chairs in the property. And my question is, would that be considered income to be declared in valuing a property?
Once again, typically as you can see on our income stream here, it's done as a leasable area approach.
Okay.
That's the best I can answer, to be honest.
Mr. Neufeld, how would you consider that for income?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, most cases you would say it's always business income. You know, like for example, you look at my office here. I don't
Yeah.
work for Colliers. I'm an independent contractor. Now, does the money they make off me count for income to the real estate? And of course, no, not. Now,
Okay.
now we're talking about chair rental. Now, a chair is not real estate, but use of the real estate for operation of the business. I think that it's, well, I don't, in an appraisal, what we would do is look at the nature of the lease, length, strength. Is this something that's predominant in the industry? And if we took it into value, we wouldn't call it real estate. We'd call it going concern value or business value. Certainly values created, but it's not real estate value.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, okay. I'm just curious
Yeah,
whether
it's
that,
good. No, it's I'm doing gas stations right now, and it's the same concept, right? Not here, but for in the real appraisal world.
okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Do I have anything else? I don't think so. We've got no rebuttal from either party, is that correct?
That's correct on my end.
Okay. Mr. Neufeld,
No, nothing.
thank you. Okay, any requirement for summary by either party?
No summation on my part, thank you.
Oh wait, I thought I'd go first.
That's true. That's right. He should go first. Actually, I'll retract that. Let's let Mr. Neufeld go first for his
No,
summary.
it was just something I was wasn't paying. I wasn't ready. Something I should have said earlier, but these properties on Academy, and what I've said to you about the settlement, I just want to make sure it's clear, is that this is more of something I'm putting forward on behalf of the ownership, so that we're not tied up for years in any sort of appeal process. It was something we worked out with the assessor 10 years ago on an idea of how to deal with it. It's not anything to do with value. If you were strict on the value interpretation, your blinders on, and you were applying the income approach, it'd be very difficult to substantiate a value greater than $200,000. But then you have to say, is this reasonable? Does it balance with the sales? No. And this is why we had the conversation with the assessors on this topic, and not. I mean, there's so many appeals going forward and dealing with the municipal board. I just like the idea of trying to resolve this in a matter we can both live with, and not have to wrangle on this. The last time, as I said, it wasn't 6 years, as I said, it was 8 years worth of that it took to resolve this. And for a small businessman, that's not fair. So I put it forward the fair number that was based on the strategy envisioned and agreed to by both sides, and sequenced it forward. Not evaluation, not scientific, but I think it's reasonable. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I have a question, and I don't want to introduce evidence here, but when you see Mr. Neufeld and Mr.
Yeah.
Pontier, when you see unique properties like this that are, we'll call them row house boutique businesses, is that accurate, I think?
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
So when the income is low or income valuation is low, does it not kind of point to the fact that maybe the direct comparison approach should be used on a unique properties like this?
Well, that was exactly the conversation we had back then, but the only problem with it is that a lot of them were sold with the business going with it.
Oh, okay, okay,
And so we only found one that was clean like that. One involved uh, um, like I said, the neighbor buying, and another was a hairdresser, and then another hairdresser took over the site, so it was fuzzy. But it's
yeah,
it tells you they're worth more than the income approach. It's just it's like having that hotel debate all over again. How do you value a hotel and strip the business from the real estate? And this guy came along and had a formula. Fine. There's none for hairdressers though. So
okay, okay, fair enough. I'm just curious there. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Your expert opinion. How's that?
yeah, good enough.
Okay, that concludes 577 Academy Road. Now, Mr. Pontanillo, now we're on to 1724 Corridon Avenue.
All right, and we'll go back to the original decorum.
Yeah.
Just give me 1 second here to reopen the files, and then I should be just ready in 1 minute. Just got to open up the Collier's brief here. 1724. Yes. Okay, I am ready to proceed now. So if we're all ready to go, up next we have our last file of the day, I believe. It's a 24-4252. The roll number is 1207-154-8100. The 2025 assessment has gone out at $705,000. Once again, we're speaking of a commercial retail store. We have 2 building records associated with the subject, 4 premises associated on the income stream, and it's a 1-story building. The actual year built and effective year built is 1979 to 1987. The total land area is 4,691 square feet. And we have a total leasable area of 3,416 square feet. On page 2, we can see the pad eye view image of the subject property that we're speaking of. On page 3, we have an overhead view of the subject property. On page 4, we have a north-facing view and an east-facing view of the subject property. And then on page 5, we have the Google Street View images from the 2024 map overlay of the subject property. We have received requests for income and expense information, so we're okay there. We do have one sale on file from February 1st, 2013 for $520,000. And we don't have any subject leases associated. On page 7, I have included some rent comparables. Once again, they're from within the same market region. We do have a spread of areas from 660 square feet up to 1,386 square feet. And then we do have rents ranging from, looks to be $17 at the lower end to just over or just under $25 at the higher end. We do have 3 premises associated on the income stream. All 3 are listed as C2 commercial space. And then we have a spread from 750 square feet to 900 square feet. And then we have modeled rates from $16.08 up to $21.84. As well, we have a 08 basement associated on the income stream at 1,066 square feet at $5.06. The total potential rent that the model's calculated is $50,995. And if you divide that by the total area, that brings us a blended rate of $14.93 per square foot. From there, we have a 5% vacancy, a 3% expense rate, and a $7 shortfall per square foot. And that brings us to our net operating income of $45,796. And then from there, we have applied a 6.5% modeled cap rate, and that brings us to our total value of $705,000. On page 9, we have a summary of the information that I've just provided. On page 10, we have our cap rate information. Page 11 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then on page 12, and taking us to the end of the brief, is the subject's income and expense information. And it appears we have a little bit of a discrepancy on page 1. They do list net as the income type being declared, although there are no recoveries. And then on page 14, the tenant verification form, it looks like we have all gross leases being declared. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you to the assessor. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes, one sec. What page were you talking about a sale?
Oh, that would be page.
Oh, I see it. Never mind. Page 6. Yes.
Yep.
And did anybody review this sale?
Once again, a cursory look. One sale from 2013, verified and included for analysis. That's the information that I had after taking a look at the sales info.
What does a cursory look mean? You look at one name of the vendor and one name of the
No,
purchaser?
I take a look at our records. I take a look at our records to see what it has put for, just to confirm that the consideration and sworn value look to be the same. And then from there, if that's the case, then I just take it as a data point. I'm not resting a ton of weight on it, but it's a data point that's there.
Right. And did you include the remark from the you said municipal board excerpts? What page were they on?
Oh, Municipal Assessment Act excerpts, not
Yes,
from the,
I'm sorry,
not from the board.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes,
You're
Municipal
right.
Assessment Act excerpts.
Yes, I'm looking at it now. That's on page 11.
11, yep.
Did you provide the definition of market value?
But I'm not sure if it's listed, to be honest here.
Well, it is in the act, but I'm just wondering, it didn't make the cut here?
I guess not. No, this is just included in the briefs when we generate them.
Okay, and does not the definition of market value indicate that it's between unrelated parties, arm's length transacting, no undue pressure, payment is in cash and Canadian dollars or the equivalent, that sort of thing? Does that sound familiar?
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, okay. So we're all working on the same definition of market value. So, but does anybody check for those factors?
We do have people in the background that check.
Like another one is, sorry, was no financing that's typical of the market. No creative financing. That was the one I forgot about. How do you do that? Do you pull the mortgages? Do you pull the interview people?
We have a process in place where we make phone calls and interview the sellers and the buyers to confirm that the information is accurate.
And was that done with this property?
I mean, I believe it was. I can't speak exactly whether it was, but it was verified. So my records would indicate that somebody from the department back in 2013 or 2014 would have made calls and verified it.
I see. I'm asking in the process because I'm obviously aware that it wasn't, and it's difficult to discuss the reasoning behind it. So I apologize for I'm circling around and not getting into the direct problem. Okay, and on this, you're including the basement again. What
Yes.
do they say the rentable space is on page 12?
On page 12, they list 1,975 square feet.
Right, and then on page the 14, is there any below ground tenant listed?
There's not, just the 3 above ground.
So why would, if they're not renting it and they're not declaring it, and they send in their mailer, why does the department then put a rent on this basement?
Well, according to the records, there's a basement there. It would have to be put some value into it if it looks to be that it's being used as some kind of storage. Maybe your brief would have some more information to illuminate us on the current use of the basement, but I'm just going with the records that I have.
And once again, there were no rents provided in evidence to support this. What were there?
I believe not, just whatever you see there for actuals. Oh, yes, no supporting rents there. They're just
Okay.
main floor rents.
Now, I'm going to ask a question about all the basements today, because it's a question about the model. I've seen rents being applied to basements from as low as $3 to as high as $17 for fairly similar miscellaneous retail properties. How can the model do this?
Well, we have two factors to consider. One is the 08 versus C9. That right away is going to give a different rental rate based on its usage, and the other one would be based on size. So the ones that you're referring to earlier, those are smaller basements. This one being 1,066 square feet, it's over 1,000 square feet, and it's also an 08 basement, so it's not a C9. So that would
I see.
indicate the difference in rental rates.
But no one's been down to the basement, have they?
I haven't myself inspected it. I don't have any records information on there.
And is the basement one huge basement, or does each unit have access to this basement separately? Do you know?
I believe you would know that information actually, Rocky.
I
Those
asking
aren't
you.
questions that I know. Those are questions that you would know. So you can
Because you would
illuminate
say,
us when you get a chance to tell us
You
about that.
answer the question then. Just answer what I asked you. Do you
I
know?
have not inspected.
Okay. And the person who's the person who puts the code on as to what it's for?
This would have been a review from an assessor who would have looked at it at the time, so it's difficult to say. These are records that carry forward from cycle to cycle unless we have a reason to change them, to be honest.
Well, I mean, for upper level space, I've never seen this broad a range of any sort in a property that you have a bunch of similar properties, and there's not a major variance in the upper level rents we've been discussing today, just the basement rents. So how could this happen in your model?
I think I've answered that question as best as I can.
Okay. And you mentioned the statement here. Did you consider their actual earnings of 25,874 as full?
Where are you getting that 25 from? Is that the net operating income you're speaking of?
That's on your page, they've submitted, and it's on your page 12.
Well, we'd have to take out the interest for one. We'd have to look at that before we start
Certainly.
putting weight on that NOI. So
Let's take the $900 off, $26,774. Did you, when you saw that number, did you not have any consideration for that the assessment could be, well, it doesn't match your model, correct? Does that give any pause to consider that it might be inaccurate, the model?
well, as I'm sure you're aware, we do have a mass appraisal approach. So while the model attempts to be accurate in its valuations, it's a mass appraisal based approach. So right now we're speaking of the specifics of the subject property.
Okay, that's all I wanted to hear. And the cap rate, sorry, I'm bouncing around 6.5%. This comes from which, or does this correspond to your page 10, any of the rows there?
The closest would be strip malls.
Strip malls. Okay. And same question as before, are you aware whether or not you had any actual sales in the 2 years prior to the reference date?
I'm not aware.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Arnell, any questions of the assessor's evidence presented?
No questions, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no, I guess regarding the age variant, any information on the effective age placed on this property, Mr.?
None more than I can provide there. We just have an effective age placed of 1987 on it.
Yeah.
That's about the best I can do there.
Okay. And we have 3 units, 3 PIDs, I guess.
That's correct. Yes,
Well,
that's correct.
including the basement, substandard basement. And the rates applied are They're kind of side by side units, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, okay. So the 900 square foot is at 1608
Mhm.
and the somewhat smaller at about 21 to $22 a square foot. What would be the reason, as Mr. Neufeld asked, because of the size, economy
There
of,
can be a size factor. Maybe at some point in the past, there would have been a review and perhaps an assessor would have maybe tried to make an adjustment quality to be a little closer to what was being declared on actuals. There can
okay,
be reasons why it was a little, why there's some variance there.
okay. Thank you. That's my only questions. Mr. Neufeld, let us get to your brief, please. Okay, if everybody is ready, please, Mr. Neufeld.
Um, I'm wondering if I can ask one follow-up question that was touched on regarding the basement.
Of course, go ahead.
Okay. Um, if you're stating that the rentable area is 3,416 square feet, uh, is this, would this then have a legally permissible parking area?
I don't have those details in front of me for the zoning particularities.
Well, okay, well, page 3, how many parking stalls? It looks like 4. Sorry, I was asking a question, but if I don't know, were you looking at it again or?
Mr. Pontanilla, do you see 4 spots?
Oh, I don't know if that was framed as a question. I was waiting for him to, I don't know if there was something else going on there. I guess that's what it looks like from an overhead view. I mean, that's just what appears to be in the front of the building there.
All right, and under do you do a planning bylaw review as part of your work?
I have not done that for this approach yet.
Well, this isn't evidence. This is what we should all know, but retail requirement for parking is 1 stall for the first 2,000 square feet and an additional stall for every 250 square feet thereafter. Based on your rentable area, the planning bylaw calls for 7 parking stalls. Have you considered that you are now valuing an illegal use?
I have not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please, 1724 Corydon Avenue.
I was really trying to be clever to get my statement into a question there, but I'll open with that. That's one of the things that the model doesn't look at. If you want to say it's leasable, then you've just turned it into an illegal use, and you can't tax an illegal use. As it stands, with the space of 1,975 square feet, the requirement for parking is 1 stall. At 3,400 feet, it's 7 stalls. So we're valuing the legal use. The model is valuing an illegal use.
Can I respond to that, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Well, you can ask questions later. I'm on a roll here.
Okay, go ahead. I'll keep it I'll keep it under my hat.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I forgot where it was. The whole issue of this, and we made it clear on our page 1, is that these rents of the 3 units include use of the basement space under their unit. It comes with the rent. It's an accessory use. It's an accessory that gets, it's the same as if I rented an office and I got a parking stall. They rented a retail space and they got use of the basement. it doesn't make it rentable. Now, the only thing that would happen is if you included that space as rentable and considered the paid rents, the value would go down because then you have to apply shortfall to that space and you have a vacancy on that space. That would be an improper application of the income approach. So they are earning 20, we went over this, $26,774 after subtracting the interest rate. Now that's what we had worked with on page 1, and I believe there's also an adjustment to the maintenance as well to further increase that by about $1,500 to the $28,144. Because as you can see in the statement, the maintenance at $11,000 is probably a high year. Now, that doesn't mean it's not valid. It doesn't mean you adjust it. What you should be doing with it is looking at for retail, probably 3 to 5 years of statements just to see how this compares and how this evens out, which is what we have, 3 to 5 years to look at. So we found it a bit high. So then that was then adjusted to the 28,144 of income that we're applying on page 1. Again, the vacancy, we're looking at a general vacancy. We're looking at a mixture of sources. The Johnson report, as with all these properties today, they don't have a really good category. This one would probably fall into the strip category or close to it. But the problem with it is that as a strip, you have other attributes, which is generally parking. This doesn't have it, so it's storefront retail. So there's no real grading for storefront retail. It's sort of a miscellaneous. And so when we went through the Johnson report, we were just looking at all the different uses and came up with a mean of about 4.5%. I think that's reasonable. The question on the non-recoverables is something I was debating here, because if you're using a gross rent and calculating the net, I think you're actually taking into account the non-recoverables already. So I think in this case that might be double addition of the non-recoverables, unlike because it's already been accounted for. So I want to adjust our income upwards for that, because it's the nature of valuing gross income buildings is that like the income approach is designed for a net building where you have these expenses and by contract, by lease, you can't recover them. You're in a gross building, you're still not recovering them, but when you're supplying your income at the end of the year, you've taken them into account. So I think our income, our NOI should be upwards from 23,960 to 1,344. So it's 25,304. The shortfall, of course, is higher because the taxes are higher. Again, another building with $8 a foot in taxes, where the model is saying it's $7. $8 taxes plus repair and maintenance plus utilities, common area. You know, again, this is an error in the modeling design. The shortfall should relate to the tax load more accurately. In an appraisal, we would never do this because that's called misleading. And you know, in a model, you say, well, it's mass appraisal, it's the way it works, and I get it. Sure, that's the answer. Doesn't mean it's right. And in regard to the cap rate, you know, of the properties we've seen today, I think that this one is probably going to generate more investor interest because of the nature of the building. It's a newer building. It's got 3 tenants in it, which is a good it's a buffer to vacancy loss because you don't lose all three tenants at once usually. So I would think that the cap rate was probably should be a bit lower than this. Like if you read our page 2, and the work I've done on it, and the optimal rate being 6.5, I don't agree that location is deficient. I think it's a great location on Academy. The coverage ratio on the parking stalls, it's 4. I saw a map, it's 5. It's still not 7, but it's not as drastic. And the size, being a major, it is an issue. It is a negative issue, but it's not a major factor. The concept of the design and layout, I don't know if it's a converted house. I don't think it is. I think it was purpose built and it's functional for its use. I don't see a problem with the design and layout. So I want to adjust the cap rate upwards to 7.5. It's not a 7 like our best sale actual sale we presented you at 7, but it's not an 8. So the new number 25,304 NOI at 7.5 is 337,386 rounded to 338,000. And we always put in last year's assessment, but last year the owner didn't get to us in time, and nothing was filed on this. It wasn't reviewed. But you don't, a building that makes $26,000 a year, $28,000 a year is not worth $600,000. It's not worth $700,000. It's in the range of $300,000 to $400,000 because it's incapable of earning more. And you can't put an artificial rate on a basement and say, well, you should be making more. You should be renting your basement out. They are already. This is the most they can get. In regard, the last comment I was going to make on the sale is that this was a fairly old sale, and it was between related parties. And I'd be happy to tell the assessor more about the sale off camera, but it is not at market value sale. The parties were related. The transaction was not brought on the market in a manner that allowed it to be properly done. So whatever number they agreed to has got nothing to do with the market. So I think I don't have anything new to say other than what we've said earlier today. There is one thing I never pointed out to you, and it was something we've been trying to work on our page 54. And it's to give you an idea of, like everybody's heard of the class grading on office. Now, there is a class grading on retail, and we're trying to give you an idea of how an investor looks at it. And Colliers sells the most commercial property in the city of Winnipeg. So we know what we're doing here. So on page 54, just to give you an idea, like Class A, that's a picture of a pad site on the Tuxedo, whatever they call it, across the street from IKEA. Brand new pad site. This is the way to go, Class A. A Class B would be the one I mentioned that just sold on, and this is the one on I'm trying to think of the legal address here. It could be Scurfield, could be Kenniston, it could be McGilvery. It's kind of in the middle. And the problem with this one is sighting. It's pushed to the rear and no visibility from the streets. They've had a hard, their turnover on tenancy in the beginning was bad because they built a big site before people moved into the neighborhood. And retail, that's a mistake. Retail, generally to be successful, needs to have a certain population to drive them. A Class C site is next, and that's more of a neighborhood style strip, services only. This is right nearby the property. It's on a minor street, Scurfield, so the street access visibility is very low. As a result, they've only been able to attract local quality tenants. very well run, but it's locals only, no brand names in here. Whereas the Class B, you can see we have national tenants in there. It's just not as good. And then your D quality is storefront retail. This is up Pembina Highway. I just took the shot at random. The old style, built in the 40s, 50s, 60s, right up to the street. Sometimes they have parking, sometimes they don't. So we are dealing with a Class D property, probably a better Class D, whereas some of the other ones we've heard today aren't. But just some background on how we rate them, and mentioned also size. Colliers doesn't put anything under 10,000 square feet in our studies at all. So this wouldn't make our study, and that doesn't mean it has a lower rate. That means it has a worse rate because it's of low interest to investors. Thank you for your time and putting up with my rambling today.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Pontigny, you had a question or two?
Yes, just a few questions. So that revised value, what was that value again? It was
338.
Okay, so would there be a reason why the value should drop by $261,000 on the subject property?
No, the value didn't drop. The perception of value in the assessment department's model is the challenge. The value never dropped.
Well, from last cycle of 599 to the requested 336.
An assessment is not an indication of value. It's an indication of what the model generated. It wasn't appealed either.
Okay. All right, fair enough. And so the basement, again, that's a point of contention. So if I could ask you to turn to my brief on page 8, I'll give you a second to get there.
Got it.
So if we look on the income stream, what's the basement label that's being designated on there?
I don't know what it means. Are you talking about 08?
That's the one, yep.
Okay.
So 08. So can you recall when we had our conversation previous that 08 basements are typically just storage in usage as opposed to a C9, which is directly leasable? In terms of our labeling, in terms of how we label it in-house.
Again, you're asking me a question that is an administrative function of a mass appraisal system, and I understand what you said. I don't agree with it, and it has nothing to do with the market value.
No, I understand, but the point was raised about an illegal use, and I would like to just make a point that the model has an 08. It's not actually a leasable space, so that discrepancy you're talking about actually doesn't exist there.
Well,
I wanted to make a point about that.
No, let's just say that was a question. No, that's not correct. Just because you call it that doesn't mean it's correct. You cannot call it leasable at all. Doesn't matter if you designate it storage, you designate it that it's not great. You can't put a value on something that's illegal to use.
How is it illegal to use? It's a storage space.
Because you wouldn't get permission from the city and an occupancy permit for it.
Where is the info?
Because you failed to meet the parking amount. And this is Corridon. Now, in my work, you'd be surprised. You shouldn't be surprised that where do you think the highest complaint on-street parking comes from in our city? Corridon and Academy. You're not going to get approval for it.
Okay, and can you just point me to where any of this basement information would be in your brief?
Basement, meaning what?
Is there any information in your brief in regards to the basement use, layout, pictures?
Yeah, page 1 was our narrative. We said the no separate basement entrances, paid rent includes access to non-rentable basement space.
Okay, so other than that, there's no other information.
Our statement.
Yes, no is what I'm looking for.
Our statement is sworn testimony.
I'm just looking for a yes or no.
This is our statement.
Thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you to the assessor. Ms. Anderson, any questions of the applicant?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Arnell?
No questions, thanks.
And I have no questions either. Any requirement for summary by either party?
I'm okay, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
Just, I guess one thing to point out. So we're trying very hard to be reasonable. And when we were discussing Academy, we agreed, crazy situation. Let's find a way to deal with it. In this case, this is not. This is more typical retail. There's nothing here that's a mystery. The thing makes $27,000 a year. That's it. Now, to comment about an old assessment is not an indication of value. You don't take $26,000 and turn it into $600,000 or $700,000. It's just not logical. You have to stick with what it makes, and you can't. And it's fully leased. They're doing their best. So I don't really like that idea of worrying about did it go down in value. It's irrelevant. It was never challenged last year, that's for sure. But that an assessment isn't value. You said that right at the beginning of our hearing today. So I was little. I think that sort of comment is inappropriate, but we all know it weighs our minds. So I want to address it, and that's all I wanted to add at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Pontonio, any response? Well, you've already had your chance, so
I would just respond that it's included in his brief, so I'm only discussing relevant information that's there.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We have heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you to both parties for appearing. You'll hear from us as soon as possible. Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you,
Thanks.
panel members. Thank you, Rocky.
Yeah. I got to talk to you later about a couple of these things if you have a
Okay.
chance.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. All right.
Good
Bye.
day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.